What if Robert Baratheon raised Jon Snow as his own son in King's Landing? Let's explore the depths of it in the video. The great gates of the Red Keep groan open as Ned Stark rides through them, his destrier's hooves echoing against the cobblestones. Dust clings to his travel-worn cloak, and the smell of the road hangs heavy on his clothes. In his arms, wrapped in a simple woolen blanket, lies an infant no more than a few weeks old. The child's dark hair catches the morning light as Ned dismounts, his movements careful to avoid disturbing the sleeping babe. Robert Baratheon emerges from the throne room, his massive frame filling the doorway. The new crown sits uneasily on his head, and his blue eyes are rimmed with red from too much wine and too little sleep. When he sees Ned approaching with the bundle, his expression shifts from weary greeting to confusion. "Ned!" Robert calls out, his voice carrying across the courtyard. "What in seven hells have you brought me?" Ned approaches his friend slowly, each step weighing heavier than the last. The lie forms on his lips, tasting like ash. "Your Grace," he begins, the formal address still strange between them. "I found something during my journey south. Something that belongs to you." Robert's eyes narrow as he peers at the infant. The child stirs, tiny fists emerging from the blanket, and Robert's breath catches. The resemblance is there if one looks for it. Dark hair like Robert had as a boy, strong features that could belong to either Stark or Baratheon blood. "This child," Ned says carefully, "was born to a tavern wench in the Riverlands. She claimed the father was a king with a warhammer who passed through her village during the rebellion." The words hang in the air between them. Robert stares at the baby, his face cycling through shock, disbelief, and something that might be hope. For a moment, neither man speaks. The only sound is the distant clatter of hooves as more riders enter the courtyard. "A son," Robert whispers, reaching out to touch the child's cheek. "My son." Ned forces himself to nod, the gesture feeling like a betrayal of everything he believes. The mother died birthing him. The villagers were going to leave him with the Septons, but when they told me of his parentage... He lets the sentence trail off, allowing Robert to draw his own conclusions. Robert takes the infant from Ned's arms, cradling him with surprising gentleness for such a large man. The baby opens his eyes, revealing dark grey irises that Robert mistakes for his own colouring. What was his name? What did she call him? "Jon," Ned replies, the name coming easier than the rest of the lie. At least this much is true, in its way. She named him Jon. "Jon Baratheon," Robert says, testing the sound. "My son, Jon Baratheon." His voice grows stronger with each repetition, as if speaking it aloud makes it real. The sound of approaching hooves draws their attention to the main gate. A column of riders in Lannister crimson crests the rise, their armor gleaming in the afternoon sun. At their head rides Tywin Lannister himself, his golden cloak billowing behind him like a banner. Beside him, on a white palfrey, sits his daughter Cersei, her golden hair elaborately braided and her green eyes bright with anticipation. Robert's jaw tightens as he sees them approach. "The Lannisters come to seal our bargain," he mutters to Ned. "Tywin offers his daughter and his gold to secure my reign." Cersei Lannister dismounts gracefully, her silk gown the colour of emeralds. She approaches with practiced poise, every step calculated to display her beauty to its best advantage. Her smile is perfectly crafted, neither too eager nor too reserved. But when her eyes fall upon the infant in Robert's arms, the expression falters. "Your Grace," she says, offering a curtsy that manages to be both respectful and somehow disdainful. "I had not expected to find you, occupied with such matters upon my arrival." Robert's grip on the child tightens protectively. "Lady Cersei, allow me to present my son, Jon Baratheon. The silence that follows stretches like a taut bowstring. Tywin Lannister's face remains carefully neutral, but his eyes glitter with calculation. Cersei's perfect composure cracks ever so slightly, a flash of something cold and dangerous crossing her features before she recovers. "Your son," she repeats, her voice level, but with an edge sharp enough to cut glass. "I was not aware that your grace had taken a wife." "I haven't," Robert replies bluntly. "The boy's mother was a tavern wench, but he is my blood, and I mean to acknowledge him." Tywin steps forward, his presence commanding immediate attention. "Your Grace, surely such matters can wait. The realm requires stability, and your marriage to my daughter will provide that. A bastard son, while noteworthy, should not complicate the more pressing affairs of state." Robert's face darkens, the storm clouds gathering in his expression. "Lord Tywin, you forget yourself. This is my son we're discussing, not some inconvenience to be set aside." Ned watches the exchange with growing unease. He can see the trap closing around them all, the consequences of his lie spinning beyond his control. Cersei's eyes fix on the infant with undisguised hostility, and Ned realizes what manner of life he may have condemned the child to. "Of course, Your Grace," Tywin says smoothly, inclining his head. "I meant no disrespect. However, I must counsel caution in such matters. The succession is a delicate affair, and legitimizing bastards has historically led to complications." Robert's laugh is harsh and bitter. "Complications? The realm just spent a year bleeding because of heiress Targaryen's madness. You think I care about historical complications?" He raises the infant higher, as if presenting him to the gathered crowd. "This is my son, my blood, and I'll be damned if I let him grow up a bastard when he has royal blood in his veins." Cersei takes a step closer, her voice honey-sweet, but with poison beneath. "Your Grace, surely wisdom suggests waiting. The child is so young, and such important decisions require time and consideration. Perhaps when our marriage is complete, and the realm is fully settled." "No." Robert's voice cuts across her words like a blade. "I lost Lyanna to this war. I've buried too many good men in pursuit of this crown. But here, in my arms, is something good that came from it all. Something pure." His eyes meet Ned's for a moment, and Ned sees the desperate hunger there. "I will not wait to acknowledge my son." Tywin's expression hardens almost imperceptibly. "Your Grace, the implications of such an action are mine to deal with," Robert finishes. "I am the king, Lord Tywin. I decide matters of succession, not you." The infant begins to fuss, tiny cries piercing the tension. Robert rocks him gently, his voice softening as he speaks to the child. "Hush now, little stag. You're safe now. No one will hurt you while I draw breath." Ned steps forward, his duty as a friend warring with his growing sense of dread. "Robert, perhaps we should discuss this privately. There are many considerations." "The decision is made," Robert declares, his voice carrying across the courtyard with kingly authority. "I will legitimize the boy. Jon Baratheon will be my acknowledged son and heir until such time as I father children in lawful wedlock." Cersei's face goes pale beneath her carefully applied rouge. The political calculation is stark and immediate. Her children would be second in line to any bastard Robert chooses to acknowledge. Her voice, when she speaks, is carefully controlled, but trembling with suppressed fury. "I see that your Grace has already formed strong attachments," she says. "I pray that wisdom will guide your decisions in the days to come." Tywin's eyes narrow as he studies his daughter's reaction, then shift to Ned with calculating intensity. "Lord Stark, you say you found this child in the Riverlands?" Ned meets the older man's gaze steadily, though his stomach churns with the deception. "I did, my lord." The resemblance to his grace was unmistakable. "Indeed," Tywin murmurs. How fortunate that such a discovery should come at this particular moment. Robert either misses the implication or chooses to ignore it. He cradles the infant closer, his earlier jovial manner replaced by fierce protectiveness. "My son will want for nothing. He'll be raised as a prince of the realm, taught to rule, to fight, to lead. The 7 kingdoms will know that House Baratheon's blood runs strong." Ned watches as the pieces fall into place around them. Cersei's barely concealed rage, Tywin's cold calculation, Robert's desperate hope, all swirling around an innocent child who carries secrets that could destroy them all. In trying to protect Jon from one danger, he may have delivered him into the heart of another. The infant opens his eyes again, those dark grey orbs that Robert sees as Baratheon, but Ned knows are purely Stark. For a moment, Jon seems to look directly at him, and Ned feels the weight of Lyanna's dying words pressing down upon him like a physical thing. "Promise me, Ned." He has kept his promise, after a fashion. Jon will be safe, protected, raised with every advantage. But as Ned watches Cersei's green eyes fix on the child with barely disguised loathing, he wonders if safety was ever truly possible for the son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark. Robert turns to address the gathering crowd of courtiers who have emerged to witness the spectacle. "Let it be known throughout the 7 kingdoms that I, Robert of House Baratheon, first of his name, King of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men, do hereby acknowledge Jon as my son, and legitimize him as Jon of House Baratheon, Prince of the 7 Kingdoms." The words echo across the courtyard like the ringing of a great bell, sealing the fate of all who hear them. In that moment, Ned realizes there is no turning back. The lie is now law, and the consequences will unfold for years to come. With that proclamation, the course of the 7 kingdoms shifts like a river changing course after a great storm. The Stag Prince has been born not of royal blood, but of a lie told by the most honorable man in Westeros to protect a child whose very existence could topple thrones. The training yard of the Red Keep rings with the clash of wooden swords as the morning sun climbs higher over King's Landing. Jon Baratheon, now 5 years old, stands barely 3 feet tall, but grips his practice blade with fierce determination. His dark hair is cropped short in the manner of a prince, and his grey eyes burn with concentration as he faces his opponent. "Keep your guard up, boy," Sir Barristan Selmy calls from the sidelines, his white cloak pristine, despite the dust swirling around the yard. "A true knight never drops his defence." Jon adjusts his stance, his small hands struggling to properly hold the wooden sword that seems almost as long as he is tall. Across from him, a larger boy of 8 swings clumsily, clearly expecting an easy victory over the young prince. Jon ducks under the wild swing and strikes back with precise control, landing a solid hit on his opponent's ribs. "Well done!" Robert's booming voice echoes across the yard as he strides forward, his massive frame casting a shadow over the small combatants. The king wears hunting leathers today, his beard showing the first hints of grey that comes with ruling a kingdom. "That's my boy. You've got the instincts of a true warrior." Jon beams at his father's praise, lowering his practice sword. The resemblance between them grows stronger with each passing year, or so Robert believes. The boy's strong jaw and determined bearing speak of Baratheon blood, though his grey eyes and quiet intensity suggest something else entirely. Robert kneels beside his son, placing a massive hand on the boy's shoulder. "What did you learn from that bout, Jon?" "That size doesn't always win," Jon replies thoughtfully, his voice still carrying the high pitch of childhood. Sir Baratheon says that speed and precision can defeat raw strength. Aye, that's true wisdom. Robert's smile falters slightly as he notices familiar approaching footsteps. But remember, when you're king someday, you'll need both strength and cunning. Queen Cersei emerges from the shadows of the walkway, her golden hair elaborately braided and her green gown rich with embroidered lions. In her arms, she carries a toddler with golden curls and bright green eyes. Joffrey Baratheon, barely 2 years old, squirms in his mother's grasp with obvious impatience. "Your Grace," Cersei says, her tone carefully neutral. "I was hoping to speak with you about the preparations for Prince Joffrey's name day celebration." Robert's expression shifts subtly, the warmth he shows Jon replaced by dutiful politeness toward his wife. "Of course. Though I think it's a bit early to be planning grand celebrations for a boy who's only just learned to walk properly." Cersei's grip on Joffrey tightens almost imperceptibly. "The second son of the king deserves proper recognition, don't you think? Especially considering his legitimate birth." The words hang in the air like poison. Jon, though young, has heard such comments before. He understands enough to know that his mother was not a queen, that there are whispers about his birth that follow him through the halls of the Red Keep. Robert's face darkens. "Jon is my acknowledged heir, Cersei. That makes him first in line, not second. Joffrey is my son as well, and I love him dearly, but the succession is not in question." "Of course not, Your Grace," Cersei replies smoothly, though her eyes flash with barely controlled anger. "I merely thought it important to ensure that all your children receive appropriate attention." Jon steps forward, his child's instinct to ease tension overriding his understanding of the complex politics at play. "Father, could Joffrey watch my training sometimes? When he's older, maybe we could practice together." Robert's face softens at his son's offer. "That's generous of you, Jon. A good king thinks of his family first." Cersei's expression shifts, something calculating flickering behind her green eyes. "How thoughtful of you, Jon. Though I'm sure you understand that Joffrey will need special attention as he grows. Being raised in the shadow of his older brother presents unique challenges." The subtle barb doesn't escape Robert's notice. His jaw tightens as he stands, his full height towering over his wife. "My sons will be raised as brothers, Cersei. Any man who suggests otherwise will answer to me." Before Cersei can respond, the sound of approaching hooves draws their attention to the courtyard entrance. A small party of riders in stark colours crests the rise, travel dust coating their grey cloaks. At their head rides Ned Stark, his face grave but softening as he spots the royal family in the training yard. "Ned!" Robert's voice booms across the space, his earlier tension forgotten in the joy of seeing his oldest friend. "You didn't tell me you were coming to King's Landing." Ned dismounts and approaches, offering a bow that Robert waves away with an impatient gesture. "Your Grace, I was returning from business in the Riverlands and thought to stop and see how the realm fares." Jon runs to Ned without ceremony, the way children do with beloved relatives. "Uncle Ned, did you bring Robb with you?" Ned's expression tightens almost imperceptibly as he looks down at the boy who calls him uncle. "Not this time, Jon. Robb is still too young for such long journeys. But he sent his greetings to his cousin." The words taste like ash in Ned's mouth. Cousin. The lie has grown so complex that even the truth must be spoken as deception. He kneels to Jon's level, studying the boy's face with careful attention. At 5, Jon shows more of Lyanna in his features than ever before. The shape of his eyes, the set of his mouth when he's thinking hard, even the way he tilts his head when listening carefully. "You've grown since I last saw you," Ned says, his voice carefully neutral. "Your father tells me you're becoming quite the swordsman." Jon's face lights up with pride. "Sir Baratheon says I have natural talent. Father taught me to hold a bow too, and I can hit the target 3 times out of 5 tries." Robert laughs, clapping Ned on the shoulder. The boy's a natural warrior, just like his old man, though he's got a softer heart than I did at his age. Yesterday, I found him sharing his supper with the castle cats. That speaks well of his character, Ned replies, though he notices how Cersei's lips purse disapprovingly at the mention of Jon's kindness to lowly creatures. Character is important, Cersei interjects smoothly, though a king must also learn when mercy becomes weakness. Perhaps Prince Jon would benefit from harder lessons as he grows older. Robert's eyes flash dangerously. Jon will learn what he needs to know when the time comes. A boy of 5 doesn't need lessons in cruelty. Ned watches the exchange with growing unease. The tension between Robert and Cersei has clearly deepened since their marriage, and Jon sits at the center of it all, unaware of how his very existence threatens the Queen's ambitions for her own son. "Father," Jon tugs at Robert's sleeve, "can Uncle Ned stay for the feast tonight? I want to show him the new horse you gave me." "Of course he can stay," Robert says warmly. "Any friend of mine is always welcome at my table." Cersei's smile is perfectly crafted, but her eyes remain cold. "How wonderful. Lord Stark, you must tell us all about your journey. I'm sure you've encountered many interesting people along the way." There's something in her tone that sets Ned's nerves on edge, a probing quality that suggests she's fishing for information. He wonders if she suspects something about Jon's true parentage, or if she's simply looking for any ammunition to use against the boy. As they begin walking toward the castle, Jon falls into step beside Ned, chattering about his lessons and his horse and his plans for when he's king someday. The boy's innocent enthusiasm cuts through Ned like a blade, reminding him of another Stark child who had dreams of glory and adventure. "Uncle Ned," Jon says quietly, glancing around to make sure the adults aren't listening. "Sometimes Mother Cersei looks at me strangely, like she doesn't like me very much. Did I do something wrong?" The question stops Ned in his tracks. He kneels again, bringing himself to Jon's eye level, and chooses his words carefully. "Sometimes, Jon, adults have complicated feelings about things that have nothing to do with you personally. Queen Cersei loves her own son very much, just as your father loves you. That doesn't mean she wishes you ill." It's not entirely true, but it's the kindest explanation he can offer to a 5-year-old boy who doesn't understand the deadly politics swirling around him. Jon nods solemnly, accepting the explanation with the trust children show toward adults they love. "I try to be nice to her. I think maybe if I'm very good, she'll like me better." The innocence of the statement nearly breaks Ned's heart. This child, who carries the blood of kings and queens, dragons and direwolves, reduces the complex hatred of ambitious adults to a simple belief that being good enough will earn him love. "Just be yourself, Jon," Ned says softly. "That's all anyone can ask of you." As they continue toward the castle, Ned glances back at the training yard where wooden swords lie abandoned in the dust. Soon enough, Jon will need to learn that real enemies cannot be defeated with kindness, and that sometimes the greatest threats come from those who smile while sharpening their knives. But for now, the boy chatters happily about horses and swords, and the hawks his father promised to show him tomorrow. For now, he is simply a prince, beloved by his father, unaware that his very existence has lit a fire that will burn for years to come. The lie Ned told 5 years ago in this very courtyard has taken root and grown into something vast and complicated. As he watches Jon run ahead to greet the castle guards, who clearly adore their young prince, Ned wonders if the truth would have been kinder than this beautiful, dangerous deception he has created. The great hall of the Red Keep gleams with the light of 1,000 candles as the assembled lords of the 7 kingdoms feast in honor of Prince Jon's 8th name day. Banners of the great houses hang from the vaulted ceiling, the golden lion of Lannister beside the crowned stag of Baratheon, the grey direwolf of Stark near the rose of Tyrell, The air thrums with conversation and the clatter of silver against porcelain. Jon sits at the high table beside his father, his small frame dwarfed by the ornate chair that will one day be his by right. His dark hair is neatly combed, and he wears a doublet of cloth of gold with the Baratheon stag emblazoned across his chest. At 8 years old, he carries himself with a gravity that seems too old for his years, aware that every eye in the hall watches his every movement. King Robert raises his goblet, his voice booming across the vast chamber. "Lords and ladies of the realm, tonight we celebrate not just my son's name day, but the future of the Seven Kingdoms. Behold Jon Baratheon, Prince of Dragonstone, and heir to the Iron Throne." The hall erupts in applause, though Jon notices it lacks the thunderous enthusiasm that typically greets royal proclamations. Some lords clap with genuine warmth, others with dutiful politeness, and a few, he counts them carefully, merely nod with thin smiles that don't reach their eyes. Lord Randil Tarly rises from his seat among the Reach Lords, his austere face carved from stone. "Your Grace," he calls out, his voice cutting through the settling applause. "The realm rejoices in your son's continued health and growth, though I confess some of us wonder about the precedent of elevating bastard blood to such heights." A deadly silence falls over the hall. Jon feels his cheeks burn with shame and anger in equal measure. He has heard such whispers before, but never spoken so boldly in public. Beside him, Robert's face darkens like a gathering storm. "Lord Tarly," the king's voice carries a warning that would terrify wise men. "Are you questioning the legitimacy of my acknowledged son?" Tarly doesn't flinch. "I question nothing, Your Grace. I merely observe that the histories tell us what happens when bastards are raised too high. The Blackfire rebellions cost the realm rivers of blood, all because—" Robert's goblet crashes against the table with a sound like breaking thunder. Demon Blackfire was legitimized after his father's death by a weak king who sought to curry favor. Jon was acknowledged from birth and raised as my heir. Any man who suggests otherwise calls me a liar. Lord Tywin Lannister leans forward slightly, his green eyes glittering with calculation. "Lord Tarly speaks of history, Your Grace, not personal insult. The realm has indeed suffered when the succession becomes unclear." "The succession is perfectly clear," Robert snarls. "Jon is my son and heir. Any other claims will be settled with steel." Jon watches the exchange with growing unease. These great lords speak of him as if he weren't present, debating his worthiness like merchants, haggling over the price of grain. Worse, he can see the truth in some of their eyes. They see him as Robert's great mistake, a bastard elevated beyond his station. Young Joffrey Baratheon, now 5 and seated with his mother, pipes up with the careless cruelty of childhood. "Father, why doesn't Jon look like you? Uncle Jaime says real princes have golden hair." The question hangs in the air like a blade. Cersei's face goes pale as she tries to quiet her son, but the damage is done. Murmurs ripple through the hall as lords note what the child has so innocently observed. Jon bears no resemblance to his supposed father's Baratheon colouring. Robert's laugh is harsh and forced. "The boy has his mother's colouring, that's all. Stark blood runs strong. Isn't that right, Ned?" Ned Stark, seated at the high table as Robert's honoured guest, feels every eye in the hall turn toward him. The irony cuts deep. Robert speaks truer than he knows, for Jon does indeed carry Stark blood, though not in the way the king believes. "Dark hair is common in the north, Your Grace," Ned says carefully. "The blood of the first men runs in many noble lines." Lord Tarly isn't satisfied. Still, the boy shows none of the Baratheon traits. King Robert was blonde as a boy, as was Prince Stannis, as was Prince Renly. In all the histories, Baratheon children favor their father's line. "Enough!" Robert roars, rising from his chair with such violence that it topples backward. I'll not sit here and listen to my son's parentage questioned by men who should be grateful I allow them to feast at my table. But the seed of doubt has been planted. Jon can see it in the faces around him. Lords who had accepted his legitimacy now look at him with new speculation. The whispers that have followed him since childhood suddenly carry new weight. Lord Tywin rises with smooth grace, his voice cutting through the tension. Your Grace, no one questions your word. However, perhaps it would serve the realm's stability if Prince Jon were to demonstrate his worthiness through deed rather than birth alone. What do you suggest, Lord Tywin? Robert's voice drips with suspicion. A trial of sorts. Let the prince prove himself worthy of the throne through courage and skill. If he is truly your son, he will show the strength of House Baratheon in his actions. Jon feels the trap closing around him. Whatever Tywin suggests will either humiliate him publicly or force him into danger beyond his years. But before he can speak, Robert nods grimly. Very well. Name your trial. Tywin's smile is sharp as a blade. Single combat. Let Prince Jon face a challenger of his own age in the yard tomorrow, before the assembled court. If he proves his mettle with steel, none can question his fitness to rule. The boy is 8 years old, Ned protests. This is madness. I was fighting with real steel at 8, Robert counters, though his voice lacks its earlier conviction. If Jon is to be king, he must prove he can defend his crown. Jon stands slowly, his child's voice carrying across the silent hall with surprising strength. I accept Lord Tywin's challenge. Tomorrow at dawn, I'll prove that worth isn't measured in the color of one's hair, but in the strength of one's heart. The hall erupts in shocked murmurs. Robert looks down at his son with pride and worry warring in his eyes. Jon, you don't have to. Yes, I do, father. Jon's grey eyes meet those of Lord Tarly, then Lord Tywin, then sweep across the assembled lords. If my legitimacy is in question, let it be answered with steel. Cersei watches from her seat, one hand resting on baby Myrcella's blanket, while the other grips her goblet. The birth of her daughter a year ago had briefly softened the succession issue, another golden-haired child to carry Lannister blood. But now, watching this dark-haired boy accept a challenge that could kill him, she sees opportunity. Your Grace, she says sweetly, surely this is too dangerous. Perhaps a contest of wits would be more appropriate, or a display of horsemanship. The challenge has been made and accepted. Robert cuts her off. Jon will prove himself as Baratheon men have always done, with sword in hand. As the feast continues with forced joviality, secret conversations begin in darkened alcoves. Lord Tywin signals to certain allies with subtle gestures, while other lords huddle together, discussing the implications of what they've witnessed. Later that night, in Tywin's private chambers, 3 men gather in conspiracy. Lord Randyll Tarly sits rigid in his chair, while Lord Mace Tyrell nervously adjusts his rings. Tywin pours wine with steady hands, his face a mask of calculated thought. The boy accepted the challenge, Tarly observes. That shows courage, I'll grant him. Courage is admirable, Tywin replies smoothly. But courage without legitimacy is merely folly. The realm needs stability, not the bastard son of a tavern wench. The king acknowledged him, Tyrell protests weakly. That makes him legitimate by law. Kings have acknowledged bastards before. Tywin's voice carries the weight of absolute certainty. The Great Council of 101 rejected the claims of Laenor Velaryon despite his legitimization. Precedent exists for choosing worthier candidates. Tarly leans forward. You speak of Prince Joffrey. I speak of what's best for the realm. A golden prince with undisputed parentage, or a dark-haired boy whose mother was a common whore. Tywin's smile is cold. Tomorrow's trial will tell us much about the prince's durability. The conspiracy deepens as the night wears on, while in his chambers, Jon practices his sword work by candlelight. His wooden blade cuts through the air with precision, born of countless hours of training. But he knows tomorrow he faces more than just another boy with a sword. In the God's Wood, Ned Stark kneels before the heart tree, his face buried in his hands. The web of lies he created 8 years ago has grown beyond his control, and now a child, Lyanna's child, may die to preserve a falsehood that was meant to protect him. "Promise me, Ned," he whispers to the darkness, remembering his sister's dying words. He had promised to keep Jon safe, but safety has proven more elusive than he ever imagined. The trial by combat will come with the dawn, and with it, the first real test of whether a bastard prince can hold his throne against those who would see him fall. In the Red Keep, ambitious lords sharpen their plans, while an 8-year-old boy prepares to fight for a crown he never asked for, carrying secrets that could destroy kingdoms. The solar of Maegor's Holdfast bathes in the golden light of late afternoon as Jon sits across from his father, studying the king's face with the intense curiosity of a 10-year-old boy. 2 years have passed since his trial by combat, where he proved his worth by defeating Lord Tarly's nephew in single combat. But the questions that arose that night have only grown stronger with time. Robert sits slumped in his chair, a goblet of wine never far from his reach, even at this early hour. His once powerful frame shows the first signs of the excesses that will define his later years, and his black hair is streaked with premature grey. When he speaks of Jon's mother, his words slur slightly with drink and old grief. "She was beautiful, your mother," Robert says, his voice distant with memory. Hair like spun gold and eyes blue as a summer sky. "Sang like a lark, she did, in that tavern in. He pauses, confusion flickering across his features. "Where was it again?" Jon leans forward, his grey eyes sharp with attention. "You said it was River Run last time, father. But before that, you said it was a tavern near Harrenhal." Robert waves a dismissive hand, wine sloshing in his cup. "Does it matter where? She's dead, boy. Dead these 10 years and more." His voice turns bitter. "They all die in the end. Your mother, my sweet Lyanna. All of them." The mention of Lyanna Stark makes Jon's pulse quicken, though he doesn't understand why. His father speaks of this dead Stark girl with a pain that seems to cut deeper than grief for a tavern wench ever should. When Robert is drunk enough, he sometimes confuses the two women in his stories, speaking of golden hair that becomes dark, of voices that shift from common to noble. "Father," Jon says carefully, "you never told me my mother's name." Robert's eyes focus on his son with an effort. "Name? Her name was—" He stares into his wine, as if the answer might be floating there. "Bella. No, that's not right. Maya? God's boy, it was a long time ago. I was fighting a war, not writing love songs." The inconsistency cuts through Jon like a blade. Each time he asks, the details change. His mother's appearance, the location of their meeting, even her name shifts like smoke in his father's wine-addled memories. A terrible suspicion has been growing in Jon's mind, fed by overheard conversations and careful observations. He looks nothing like Robert Baratheon. Nothing at all. The door to the solar opens, and Ned Stark enters with the quiet grace that has always marked him. He wears travel-stained clothes, and his face shows the strain of a long journey from Winterfell. Behind him comes a woman Jon recognizes from portraits, but has never met in person. Lady Catelyn Stark, beautiful and stern, with auburn hair and blue eyes that seem to measure everything they see. A young boy peeks out from behind her skirts, perhaps 9 years old, with the same auburn hair and a face that marks him unmistakably as Ned's son. This must be Robb, Jon realizes, his supposed cousin who has lived at Winterfell while Jon grew up in King's Landing. "Your Grace?" Ned says formally, though his eyes soften when they fall upon Jon. "I hope we're not intruding." Robert struggles to his feet, swaying slightly. "Ned, my old friend. And Lady Catelyn, welcome to King's Landing." His gaze falls upon young Robb with interest. And this must be your heir, a fine-looking boy. He has the Tully look about him. Jon watches as Robb steps forward with natural confidence, offering a perfect bow. Your Grace, it's an honor to meet the king. Well spoken, Robert approves. Then he gestures toward Jon. And here's my boy. Jon, meet your cousin, Robb. The two boys regard each other with the cautious interest of children meeting for the first time. Robb's open, friendly expression contrasts sharply with Jon's more guarded demeanor. When Robb smiles and extends his hand, Jon takes it readily enough. Cousin, Robb says warmly. Father's told me much about you. And Uncle Ned has told me stories of Winterfell, Jon replies. Perhaps you can show me how to build proper snowmen when winter comes to the south. The easy camaraderie between the boys seems to pain Catelyn Stark deeply. She watches Jon with an expression that Jon can't quite interpret. Not hatred, exactly, but something cold and distant that makes him want to step closer to his father for protection. Lady Catelyn, Jon says politely, offering the same bow he gave to Robb. I'm pleased to finally meet you. Catelyn's response is a curtsy, so brief it borders on insulting. Prince Jon. Her voice carries no warmth, no acknowledgement of kinship. When she looks at him, it's as if she's seeing something that causes her physical pain. Jon's confusion is immediate and acute. This woman should welcome him as her nephew, should show him some measure of the affection she clearly bears for her own son. Instead, she treats him like a stranger at best, an enemy at worst. Ned catches the exchange, and his face tightens with anguish. He moves to stand beside Jon, placing a protective hand on the boy's shoulder. Jon, why don't you show Robb to the training yards? I'm sure he'd like to see how the Southern Knights practice. Of course, Uncle Ned. Jon's voice is steady, but his eyes keep drifting back to Catelyn's cold expression. Robb, would you like to see the armory? They have weapons from all over the Seven Kingdoms. As the boys leave, chattering with the easy friendliness of youth, the adults remain behind in heavy silence. Robert has already poured himself another cup of wine, seemingly oblivious to the tension crackling through the room. Catelyn turns to Ned the moment the boys are gone, her voice low and fierce. You didn't tell me he would look so much like— Careful, Ned interrupts, glancing meaningfully at Robert. Walls have ears in King's Landing. But Catelyn's restraint has reached its limit. That boy has stark coloring, Ned. Stark eyes, stark hair, even the shape of his face. If I didn't know better, I'd say he was— You'd say he was what? Robert's voice cuts through her words, suddenly sharp despite the wine. My son looks like a Stark because his mother had northern blood. Nothing more. Catelyn's eyes flash dangerously. Northern blood? From a tavern wench. How convenient that she should happen to look so much like— Catelyn. Ned's voice carries a warning that stops her short. Not here. Not now. The moment stretches taut as a bowstring. Catelyn stares at her husband with growing realization, seeing the guilt written across his features like words on a page. Ned, for his part, looks like a man walking to his own execution. Robert, drunk and focused on his own pain, misses the subtle exchange entirely. The boy's mother is dead, he says with finality. Leave it at that. Catelyn nods stiffly, but her eyes never leave Ned's face. The promise of a reckoning burns in her gaze. Later that evening, as the castle settles into quiet, Jon finds himself wandering the corridors of Maegor's Holdfast. Sleep eludes him, driven away by questions that multiply with each passing hour. His steps carry him toward the royal apartments, where he hopes to find his father in a clearer state of mind. As he rounds a corner, he hears voices coming from an alcove ahead, a man and woman speaking in urgent, hushed tones. Jon recognizes Queen Cersei's voice immediately, but the man's voice puzzles him until he creeps closer and realizes it belongs to Sir Jaime Lannister, her twin brother. Can't keep doing this, Jaime is saying. Robert grows more suspicious each day, And if he ever discovers— He won't discover anything, Cersei interrupts fiercely. He's too drunk and too stupid to see what's right in front of him. Besides, he's too obsessed with that bastard boy to pay attention to his own wife. Jon freezes, pressing himself against the wall. They're talking about him. That bastard may be our salvation, Jaime replies. As long as Robert believes Jon is his heir, our children remain safe from his notice. Safe? Cersei's laugh is bitter. Joffrey should be his heir, not some tavern wench's brat. Every day that boy lives is another day my son's birthright is stolen from him. Careful, sister. Such words could be seen as treason. Jon hears the rustle of silk as they move closer together. When he dares to peek around the corner, he sees something that makes his young mind struggle to understand. Queen Cersei and Ser Jaime stand locked in an embrace that has nothing brotherly about it. Their lips meet with passionate intensity, hands roaming in ways that Jon knows, even at 10, are not appropriate between siblings. The sight burns itself into his memory, the golden hair mingling in the torchlight, the desperate hunger in their movements, the way they touch each other as if they're drowning, and each is the other's salvation. I love you, Cersei whispers against Jaime's lips. Only you. Never Robert. Never anyone else. And I love you, Jaime replies. More than life itself. Jon pulls back, his heart hammering so loudly he's certain they'll hear it. The implications of what he's witnessed crash over him like a cold wave. Queen Cersei and Ser Jaime are— What? He doesn't have words for what he's seen, but he knows instinctively that it's wrong, dangerous, and absolutely secret. He flees through the corridors, his bare feet silent on the cold stone. Behind him, the guilty lovers remain oblivious to their discovery, lost in their forbidden passion, while the realm sleeps on, unaware of the rot at its very heart. In his chambers, Jon lies awake, staring at the ceiling. Two revelations war in his mind: the growing certainty that Robert Baratheon is not truly his father, and the shocking discovery of the Queen's adultery with her own brother. Both secrets feel too large and dangerous for a 10-year-old boy to carry. But carry them he must. In the Game of Thrones, even children must learn to guard their tongues, for the wrong word spoken to the wrong person can bring down kingdoms. The questions that have plagued him about his parentage now feel more urgent than ever. If Robert is not his father, then who is? And why has Uncle Ned, the most honorable man in the Seven Kingdoms, helped perpetuate such an enormous lie? Outside his window, King's Landing sleeps fitfully, unaware that a bastard prince lies awake, counting secrets that could topple the Iron Throne itself. The clash of steel rings across the training yard of the Red Keep as Jon Baratheon, now 12 years old and standing nearly as tall as a grown man, exchanges blows with Ser Aron Santagar, the Red Keep's master-at-arms. Jon's dark hair is plastered to his forehead with sweat, and his grey eyes burn with the intensity that has marked him since childhood. 2 years of advanced training have transformed him from a promising boy into a genuinely formidable young warrior. Better, Ser Aron grunts, as Jon's blade slides past his guard to touch his ribs. But you're still dropping your shoulder before you strike. In a real fight, that tell will get you killed. Jon nods, breathing hard but eager to continue. At 12, he possesses a lean strength that speaks of hours spent in practice, and his movements carry a fluid grace that draws admiring looks from the castle guards who pause to watch. Unlike many boys of noble birth, Jon trains alongside common-born soldiers, sharing their meals and listening to their stories with genuine interest. "My prince," calls out Tamard, a grizzled man-at-arms who serves in the Red Keep's garrison. "You fight like you were born with a sword in your hand. Better than half the knights I've served with." Jon grins and clasps the older man's shoulder. "Only because you taught me that trick with the pommel strike, Tamard. A prince learns from everyone, or he learns nothing at all." The easy familiarity between prince and common soldier draws disapproving looks from several courtiers observing from the gallery. Lord Janos Slint, recently appointed commander of the City Watch, whispers something to his companion that makes them both sneer. "The boy consorts with sellswords and stable hands," Slint mutters, loud enough for his words to carry. "What manner of king will he make if he cannot maintain proper distance from his lessers?" Jon hears the comment, but chooses to ignore it, focusing instead on Sir Aaron's next lesson. He has grown used to such criticism over the past 2 years. His preference for the company of honest soldiers over scheming courtiers has earned him many enemies among the nobility, who see his egalitarian nature as weakness rather than strength. The training session ends as the sun reaches its peak and Jon makes his way toward the castle, Tomard and 2 other guards falling into step beside him. It has become routine for Jon to walk with his guards rather than ahead of them. Another breach of protocol that scandalized the court, but endeared him to those sworn to protect him. They are crossing the serpentine steps when it happens. The crossbow bolt meant for Jon's heart instead strikes Tomard in the chest as the loyal guard throws himself in front of his prince. The old soldier crashes to the ground with a grunt of pain and surprise, his blood spreading across the ancient stones. "Assassins!" Jon shouts, drawing his sword as chaos erupts around him. More bolts whistle through the air as his remaining guards form a protective circle. Jon can see movement in the shadows above, at least 3 men with crossbows positioned in the tower windows. Sir Barristan Selmy appears as if summoned by the wind, his white cloak billowing as he charges up the steps with a dozen gold cloaks behind him. Steel rings against steel as the assassins abandon their crossbows for swords, fighting desperately to escape. Jon kneels beside Tomard, pressing his hands against the man's wound to stem the bleeding. The guard's face has gone grey, but his eyes remain focused on his prince. Did I do good, my prince?" Tomard whispers, his voice barely audible above the sounds of combat. "You saved my life," Jon replies fiercely. "You're the truest knight I've ever known, and I won't let you die." But even as he speaks, Tomard's eyes lose their focus, and his breathing stills. Jon feels something inside him break as he closes the dead man's eyes, a rage building in his chest unlike anything he has ever known. The surviving assassin is dragged before Jon 20 minutes later, bloodied but alive. Sir Barristan has caught him trying to escape through the castle's cisterns. The man wears common clothes, but the quality of his weapons and the calluses on his hands mark him as a professional killer. "Who sent you?" Jon demands, his voice carrying an authority that surprises everyone present. At 12, he sounds less like a boy and more like a king. The assassin spits blood and says nothing. King Robert arrives like a thunderstorm, his face purple with rage and his massive hands clenched into fists. When he sees Tomard's body, his fury becomes something terrifying to behold. "Take this bastard to the black cells," Robert roars. "I want him questioned by my best interrogators. I want names. I want conspirators. I want every man who even thought about harming my son dragged out into the light." "Your Grace," Jon begins. "Perhaps we should—" "No." Robert's voice cuts through his son's words like an axe. "Someone tried to murder my heir. There will be justice, and it will be swift and terrible." 3 days later, the great square before the Sept of Baelor runs red with blood. The interrogation has yielded names, a conspiracy involving minor lords, ambitious merchants, and foreign gold. 7 men kneel before the executioner's block, while thousands of King's Landing's citizens watch in horrified fascination. Robert stands on the platform above, his crown gleaming in the afternoon sun, his voice carrying to every corner of the square. "Let all men know the penalty for treason against the Iron Throne," he bellows. "Let all men see what happens to those who would harm my son." Jon stands beside his father, his face pale, but his posture straight. He has argued against the public executions, pleading for exile or service on the wall instead of death. But Robert would not be swayed. "The king's justice must be seen," he declared, "or more conspirators would crawl from the shadows. The executioner's sword falls 7 times. Jon watches each death with growing horror. These men plotted to kill him, yes, but seeing them die feels like another part of his soul dying with them. When the crowd cheers after each execution, Jon feels sick to his stomach. Justice is done, Robert declares, his voice ringing with satisfaction. Let this be a lesson to any who would threaten House Baratheon. But in the royal box, Queen Cersei watches with calculating eyes. She leans toward her son Joffrey, now 9 years old and tall for his age, whispering urgently in his ear. You see how the people react to blood, my sweet prince, she murmurs. Your father rules through fear, and fear can be a powerful tool. Remember this when you are king. Joffrey's green eyes gleam with excitement as he watches the executions. Will I be king, mother? What about Jon? Cersei's smile is sharp as a blade. Bastards have short lives, my darling. Their claims to thrones even shorter. After the executions, Jon retreats to his chambers, his appetite gone, and his sleep troubled by nightmares of falling axes and cheering crowds. He thinks of Tamard, dead because he served his prince faithfully, and of the 7 men who died for plotting against a boy they had never met. A soft knock at his door breaks his brooding. Enter, he calls, expecting to see a servant or guard. Instead, Tyrion Lannister steps into the chamber, his dwarf stature made even more diminutive by the room's high ceiling. The youngest Lannister son has grown into a man of wit and intelligence, his mismatched eyes studying Jon with keen interest. My prince, Tyrion says with a slight bow, I heard you were unwell after today's festivities. I'm not unwell, Jon replies carefully. Just thinking. Dangerous habit? Thinking. I found it leads to all sorts of uncomfortable conclusions. Tyrion moves to the window, gazing out at the city below. Tell me, do you believe those men deserved to die? Jon considers the question seriously. They tried to kill me. The law says that's treason, and the penalty for treason is death. The law says many things. The question is whether justice and law are the same thing. Tyrion's eyes glitter with something like approval. You argued for mercy, I'm told. Dead men can't learn from their mistakes, Jon says simply, and revenge doesn't bring back those we've lost. Wise words from one so young. Tell me, Prince Jon, do you know why those men wanted you dead? The question catches Jon off guard. In all the investigations and interrogations, no one has asked him to consider the motivation behind the plot. Because I stand in their way, somehow. Precisely. You stand between ambitious men and their goals. Your very existence threatens plans that have been years in the making. Tyrion's smile is sardonic. The question you must ask yourself is this. Will killing a few conspirators end the threat, or will it simply force your enemies to be more careful next time? Before Jon can answer, heavy footsteps in the corridor announce the arrival of Robert, still flushed with wine and the satisfaction of executed justice. Behind him walks Lord Tywin Lannister, recently arrived from Casterly Rock and wearing his customary expression of cold calculation. Jon! Robert booms, throwing his arm around his son's shoulders. Lord Tywin has come to counsel us on matters of security. He believes we may not have rooted out all the conspirators. Tywin's pale green eyes study Jon with the same intensity he might use to examine a chess piece. Your Grace is wise to be cautious. Today's executions send a message, but they also create martyrs. Some may see your son as a usurper whose removal would restore natural order. Natural order? Jon's voice carries a dangerous edge. What natural order would that be, Lord Tywin? The order where legitimate heirs inherit before bastards, no matter how acknowledged, Tywin replies smoothly. I speak only of how others might see the situation. Of course, your father's word is law. Robert's face darkens at the implied threat. My son's legitimacy is not in question. Any man who suggests otherwise can join those 7 in their graves. Of course, Your Grace. I merely suggest that Prince John might benefit from additional protection. Perhaps a food taster, expanded guard rotations, restrictions on his movements until we're certain the threat has passed. John feels the walls closing in around him. In the name of protecting him, they would turn him into a prisoner in his own castle. He looks at Tyrion, who offers a slight nod of understanding. I thank you for your concern, Lord Tywin, John says carefully. But I won't hide behind walls and guards. A king, or a future king, must be seen by his people, must understand their struggles and their needs. Fear is no way to live. Tywin's smile is thin as winter ice. Fear keeps kings alive, my prince. Love gets them killed. As the adults continue their discussion of security measures and political necessities, John stares out at the city below, where smoke still rises from the square where 7 men died in his name. Somewhere in those twisting streets, he knows, other conspirators plot and plan, watching and waiting for their chance. The crown of thorns grows heavier with each passing day, and John begins to understand that being heir to the Iron Throne means carrying the weight of every life it touches, willing or not. The throne room of the Red Keep echoes with the sound of footsteps as Ned Stark approaches the Iron Throne, his face grave with the weight of the decision before him. King Robert sits slouched among the twisted swords of Aegon's enemies, his crown askew and his eyes red-rimmed from another night of heavy drinking. Beside the throne, Jon Baratheon stands tall at 13 years old, his dark hair now worn longer in the fashion of young men, his grey eyes alert and watchful. Ned, Robert's voice booms across the vast chamber. I've called you here to offer you the greatest honor I can bestow. I name you Hand of the King to serve as my chief advisor and the second most powerful man in the 7 kingdoms. Ned's hesitation is visible to all who watch. Jon sees the conflict in his uncle's face, the same struggle that has marked their every interaction since he was a child. The guilt that Ned carries like a physical burden seems to grow heavier with each passing year. Your Grace, Ned begins carefully. I am honored by your trust, but I must consider. There's nothing to consider. Robert cuts him off with a gesture. The realm needs your honesty, Ned. I need your honesty. The boy needs it too. His gaze falls upon Jon with paternal warmth. You'll help me prepare my son for the throne he'll inherit. Who better to teach him honor and duty than the most honorable man I know? The irony cuts through Ned like a blade. To teach Jon honor while living a lie that grows more complex with each passing day. To prepare the boy for a throne that should never be his by rights of birth. Yet looking at Jon, tall, serious, already showing the bearing of a king, Ned wonders if bloodlines matter less than character. I accept, Your Grace, Ned says at last, his voice heavy with resignation. I will serve as your hand. Jon's face lights up with genuine joy. At 13, he still possesses enough innocence to believe this appointment means more time with the uncle he adores, more opportunities to learn from the man he considers the finest example of northern honor. Uncle Ned, Jon says, after the formal ceremony concludes, will you bring the family south? I've only met Robb briefly, and I've never seen my cousins, Sansa, Arya, or Little Bran. Ned's smile is strained but genuine. Yes, Jon. The Hand's family traditionally resides in King's Landing. You'll have plenty of opportunity to know your cousins. 3 weeks later, the Stark family arrives in King's Landing, like a breath of northern air in the stifling heat of the capital. The royal family and assembled court gather in the Red Keep's main courtyard to greet them, banners snapping in the warm breeze. Catelyn Stark rides beside her husband, her auburn hair braided in the northern style, and her blue eyes taking in the splendor of the capital with careful assessment. Behind them come their children, Robb at 12, now showing clear signs of the man he'll become, Sansa at 10, her red-gold hair shining like copper in the sunlight, wild Arya at 7, her grey eyes darting everywhere at once, and young Bran at 6, riding his pony with the fearless confidence of childhood. Jon stands beside his father as the Starks dismount, his excitement barely contained. These are his family, his blood, though he doesn't know how true that statement really is. When Arya spots him, she breaks away from her mother's side and runs toward him with the unguarded enthusiasm of a child. "Jon!" she cries, throwing her arms around his waist. "You're so tall. Are you really going to be king someday?" Jon laughs, the sound bright and genuine as he hugs his young cousin. "Someday, perhaps. But for now, I'm just happy to meet you, Arya Stark." Sansa approaches with more decorum, offering a perfect curtsy. At 10, she already shows signs of the beauty she'll become, her red gold hair framing a face that's both sweet and serious. "Your Grace," she says formally, "I'm honored to meet my cousin, the Prince." "Just Jon," he replies with a smile, taking her hand and kissing it in the courtly manner. "We're family, after all." But Sansa's eyes have already moved past him to where Prince Joffrey stands with his mother. At 10, Joffrey has grown into a beautiful boy, with golden curls and green eyes that shine with what looks like kindness to those who don't know him well. Sansa stares at him with the open admiration of a girl seeing her first true prince. Queen Cersei notices the look immediately, her green eyes glittering with calculation. She moves forward with practiced grace, her voice honey-sweet as she addresses the Stark children. "How wonderful to have such lovely children grace our court," she says, her gaze focusing on Sansa. "Lady Sansa, you're even more beautiful than the songs claimed. I do believe you and my son Joffrey are of an age." Joffrey steps forward with the confident smile he's perfected over the years. Unlike Jon's natural warmth, Joffrey's charm feels rehearsed. But Sansa is too young and too dazzled by the Golden Prince to notice the difference. "Lady Sansa," Joffrey says, with a bow that would do credit to a master of courtesy, "would you honor me with your company at tonight's feast? I should like to show you the wonders of King's Landing." Sansa's blush is immediate and obvious. Yes, Your Grace. I would be honored." Jon watches the exchange with growing unease. He has spent years observing Joffrey, and while the prince can be charming when it serves his purposes, Jon has seen the cruelty that lurks beneath the golden exterior, the memory of cats found dead in the castle gardens, of servants dismissed for mysterious accidents, haunts him. "Perhaps," Jon interjects carefully, "we could all explore the castle together. I'm sure Arya and Bran would enjoy seeing the dragon skulls in the throne room." "Dragon skulls?" Arya's eyes light up with excitement. "Real dragons." "Real dragons," Jon confirms. "Would you like to see them?" "Yes." Both Arya and Bran chorus enthusiastically. Cersei's smile grows sharper. "How thoughtful of you, Jon. Though I'm sure Prince Joffrey would prefer to give Lady Sansa a more intimate tour. After all, they have so much to discuss." The subtext is clear to the adults present. Cersei is already planning to use Sansa as a tool against Jon, to bind the Starks to the Lannister cause through marriage and manipulation. That evening, the great hall blazes with light as the welcome feast begins. Jon sits at the high table between his father and Uncle Ned, watching as Joffrey lavishes attention on Sansa, while Arya fidgets beside her scepter, clearly bored by the formal proceedings. "Father," Jon says quietly to Robert, "I've been thinking about marriage alliances. Perhaps it would be wise to consider a betrothal between myself and one of the great houses." Robert raises an eyebrow. "Getting ahead of yourself, aren't you, boy? You're barely 13. "Old enough to think about the future of the realm," Jon replies. "A strong alliance could help secure my position." From across the table, Cersei's voice carries a honeyed poison. Such wisdom from one so young, though I wonder if young Jon understands the delicate nature of such negotiations. After all, marriage is not just about personal desires, but about legitimacy, bloodlines, and the stability of dynasties. The barb hits home. Once again, Cersei questions his legitimacy without stating it directly, planting seeds of doubt in the minds of all who listen. "My son's legitimacy was settled years ago," Robert growls. "Any marriage alliance he makes will be based on the strength of his character and the needs of the realm." "Of course, Your Grace," Cersei replies smoothly. "I merely suggest that perhaps Prince Joffrey and Lady Sansa would make a more traditional match. The joining of two ancient houses, both with unquestioned bloodlines." Ned's knuckles whiten as he grips his goblet. The trap is closing around them all, Cersei seeking to bind his daughter to her cause while simultaneously undermining Jon's position. "Lady Sansa is too young for such talk," Ned says firmly. "When the time comes, she will marry where her heart and her duty guide her." "The heart can be educated," Cersei observes with a meaningful look toward where Joffrey is entertaining Sansa with stories of knights and chivalry. Jon excuses himself from the high table and makes his way to where Arya sits, clearly miserable in her formal dress and constrained by courtly manners. "Would you like to escape for a while?" he asks quietly. "I know a place where we can see the whole city." Arya's face brightens immediately. "Yes, this feast is dreadfully boring." They slip away from the Great Hall and climb the winding stairs to one of the Red Keep's highest towers. From there, King's Landing spreads out below them like a glittering web, the lights of the city reflecting off the waters of Blackwater Bay. "It's beautiful," Arya breathes, her earlier fidgeting replaced by wonder. "It's mine to protect someday," Jon says quietly. "All those lights represent people, families, children, dreams. When I'm king, their welfare will be my responsibility." Arya studies his profile in the moonlight. "Are you afraid?" Jon considers the question seriously. "Yes, every day. Fear keeps you careful, keeps you honest about your limitations. Only fools and tyrants feel no fear." "You sound like father when he talks about duty." "Uncle Ned is the best man I know," Jon replies. "If I can be half the leader he is, the realm will be in good hands." The next morning brings the Hands Tournament, where knights from across the Seven Kingdoms gather to compete in Jon's honor. The stands fill with lords and ladies dressed in their finest, while banners snap in the breeze above the lists. Jon sits in the royal box beside his father, wearing armor for the first time in a public setting. At 13, he's still too young for the main events, but Robert has arranged for him to compete in the Squires Tournament against boys his own age. "Remember, son," Robert says, as Jon prepares to take the field, "it's not about winning or losing. It's about showing courage and honor in the face of challenge." Jon nods, though his stomach churns with nervousness. This is his first public test as a warrior, and he knows every eye in the kingdom watches to see how the heir to the Iron Throne comports himself. His first opponent is a boy from the Reach, tall and strong but lacking Jon's speed and precision. The bout ends quickly, Jon's sword finding its mark, while his opponent's wild swings meet only air. From the stands, the crowd cheers with genuine enthusiasm. Whatever questions they may have about Jon's birth, they cannot deny his skill or courage. As he removes his helm and raises his sword in acknowledgement of the crowd's approval, Jon catches sight of Cersei's face in the royal box. Her expression is cold calculation, mixed with growing concern. Every cheer for Jon is a threat to her own children's future, and she knows it. The tournament continues through the afternoon, with Jon advancing through each round until he faces the final opponent, a boy from the Westerlands whose uncle serves House Lannister. The final bout is harder than all the others combined. Jon's opponent fights with a desperation that suggests more than personal honor is at stake. As their swords clash and ring, Jon realizes this boy has been instructed to defeat him, to humiliate him before the assembled nobility. But Jon has trained for this moment all his life. Drawing on everything Ser Barristan and his other instructors have taught him, he fights with a combination of skill and instinct that leaves the crowd breathless. The end comes suddenly. Jon's opponent overextends himself in a final desperate lunge, and Jon's riposte catches him perfectly, sending him sprawling to the ground. The roar of approval from the crowd is deafening. "Prince Jon! Prince Jon!" they chant, and for a moment, the boy who carries so many secrets allows himself to bask in their genuine affection. As he stands victorious in the center of the field, Jon looks up at the royal box where his family watches. Uncle Ned's face shows pride mixed with worry, understanding better than anyone the dangers that come with such public approval. In the shadows behind the royal box, Tywin Lannister watches with the cold expression of a man making calculations. The tournament has shown him something important about the bastard prince. Jon Baratheon is not just a political threat, but a genuinely formidable young man who commands real loyalty. The Game of Thrones grows more complex with each passing day, and Jon stands at the center of it all, unaware that his greatest challenges are still to come. The Red Keep's ancient library stands shrouded in afternoon shadows as Jon Baratheon, now 14 and tall enough to reach the highest shelves without assistance, carefully examines a ledger from the royal archives. Dust motes dance in the shafts of sunlight, streaming through tall windows, and the musty smell of old parchment fills his nostrils as he traces his finger down columns of faded ink. For weeks, Jon has been searching through birth records, tax rolls, and travel documents from the years surrounding his birth. What started as idle curiosity has grown into something approaching obsession. Every story his father tells about his mother contains contradictions that gnaw at Jon's mind like splinters beneath the skin. Birth registered in the 9th moon of 283, Riverlands Tavern. Jon reads aloud to himself, his voice barely a whisper in the empty chamber. Mother's name given as Willa, serving wench, dark of hair and eye, died in childbirth. He frowns and sets the ledger aside, reaching for another document from the same period. This one, a tax record from a village near Harrenhal, lists no births to any woman named Willa in that year. More troubling still, the tavern his father supposedly visited, according to his drunken stories, burned down 2 years before Jon's birth. The pieces don't fit, have never fit, and Jon's growing maturity allows him to see the gaps more clearly with each passing day. Heavy footsteps echo through the library, and Jon quickly slides the documents under other papers as his father enters. Robert Baratheon looks older than his 38 years, his once powerful frame growing soft around the middle, while his face shows the ravages of too much wine and too little sleep. His breathing comes hard from the simple effort of climbing stairs, and his hands shake slightly when he thinks no one is watching. "There you are, boy," Robert says, his voice carrying the wheeze that has become more pronounced in recent months. "What are you doing buried in these dusty old books? A king should be out hunting, fighting, living life, not hiding away like some grey rat." Jon closes the ledger carefully, his expression neutral. "Learning about the realm I'll rule someday, father. Knowledge is a weapon as sharp as any sword." Robert grunts and settles heavily into a chair that groans under his weight. Spoken like Ned Stark's nephew, always thinking, always planning. His eyes grow distant with memory and wine. "I was never one for books. Give me a battlefield or a boar hunt, something honest and straightforward." "Father," Jon says carefully, seizing the opportunity, "you've never told me much about the time when I was born. The war was ending. You were becoming king. It must have been a difficult period." Robert's face darkens, and for a moment something like pain flickers across his features. "Difficult?" "The war cost me everything that mattered. Lyanna was dead. Rhaegar had taken her from me forever, and I was left to rule a kingdom I'd never wanted." His voice turns bitter. "Your mother was a brief comfort in dark times, nothing more." "You loved her, though?" Jon presses, watching his father's reaction carefully. "My mother?" Robert's laugh is harsh and empty. "Love? Boy, I loved only one woman in my life, and she died in a tower in Dawn while I was fighting her kidnapper's war. His eyes focus on John with an intensity that makes the boy uncomfortable. Your mother was convenient, a warm body when I needed forgetting. The words cut deep, but John persists. What was she like? You've told me different things over the years. Sometimes you say she was blonde, sometimes dark-haired. Sometimes you met her in the Riverlands, sometimes near King's Landing. Robert's eyes narrow dangerously. Are you calling me a liar, boy? No, father. I just want to understand. You want to understand? Robert's voice rises to a roar that echoes through the library. Fine. Your mother was a whore I fucked because I couldn't have the woman I really wanted. She meant nothing to me, do you hear? Nothing. Just another tavern slut who opened her legs for a crown. The brutal honesty hits John like a physical blow. He has suspected for years that Robert's feelings about his mother were complex, but hearing it stated so boldly strips away any remaining illusions. But Lyanna Stark, John says quietly, she meant everything to you. Robert's rage crumbles into something like despair. Everything. She was honor and beauty and strength, all wrapped in northern steel. When Rhaegar took her, when he killed her with his madness and his lust, his voice breaks. I should have saved her. Should have been faster, stronger, better. John watches his father's breakdown with growing understanding. The pieces of a puzzle he's been trying to solve for months suddenly begin to fit together in a way that terrifies him. Father, what if my mother wasn't who you think she was? Robert's head snaps up, his eyes red-rimmed and dangerous. What are you saying? The records don't match your stories. The dates, the places, the names, none of it adds up. What if someone lied to you? What if someone told you I was your son when I was really— Enough! Robert's bellow shakes dust from the rafters. I don't want to hear another word about this madness. You are my son, acknowledged and legitimized. Any man who suggests otherwise can answer to my hammer. But even as he rages, John can see doubt creeping into his father's eyes. The inconsistencies that have plagued John are now troubling Robert as well, forcing him to confront questions he has spent 14 years avoiding. Robert storms from the library, leaving John alone with his thoughts and his terrible suspicions. If he is not Robert's son, then whose is he? And why would Uncle Ned, the most honorable man in Westeros, help perpetuate such a massive deception? That evening, John seeks out Ned Stark in the Hand's Tower, where he finds his uncle poring over correspondence from across the realm. Ned looks up as John enters, and something in the boy's expression makes him set down his quill with careful attention. You look troubled, John. What weighs on your mind? John closes the door behind him and takes a seat across from Ned, his grey eyes, so like Lyanna's, though Ned will not let himself think it, fixed intently on his uncle's face. I've been researching my birth, Uncle. The records in the Royal Archives. They don't match Father's stories about my mother. Ned goes very still, his face becoming a careful mask. Records can be incomplete, John. The war years were chaotic, and many documents were lost or incorrectly transcribed. All of them? John's voice carries a skepticism that cuts through Ned's deflection. Every single record that mentions my birth contains different details, different names, different places, different dates. The silence stretches between them like a drawn bowstring. Ned's hands rest flat on his desk, and John can see the white of his knuckles as he grips the wood. Uncle, John says softly, I know you loved your sister Lyanna. Father speaks of her with a pain that goes deeper than any wound. What if there's a connection between her death and my birth that no one wants to talk about? Ned's face goes ashen. For a moment, John thinks he might confess everything. The Tower of Joy, the promise to Lyanna, the terrible secret that has weighed on him for 14 years. But before Ned can speak, urgent knocking at the door interrupts them. "Lord Stark!" The voice belongs to one of the household guards. "You must come at once. There's been an incident in the royal chambers." Both men rush through the corridors of the Red Keep, Jon's questions temporarily forgotten in the face of crisis. They arrive at the royal chambers to find chaos. Servants running back and forth, maesters huddling in urgent conference, and the sound of Queen Cersei's voice raised in what might be anger or fear. "What's happened?" Ned demands of Sir Boros Blount, who stands guard at the chamber door. "The king collapsed during his evening meal," Blount replies tersely, clutched his chest and fell from his chair. "The maesters are with him now." Jon pushes past the guards into the chamber, where he finds Robert lying on his massive bed, his face grey and his breathing laboured. Grand Maester Pycelle hovers nearby with various potions and instruments, while Cersei stands at the foot of the bed, her expression unreadable. "Father!" Jon rushes to Robert's side, taking his hand. The king's fingers feel cold and clammy, despite the warmth of the room. Robert's eyes focus on his son with obvious effort. "Jon," he whispers, his voice barely audible. "My boy, I need to tell you. Don't strain yourself," Jon says urgently. "You're going to be fine. The maesters will—" "No." Robert's grip tightens with surprising strength. "Listen to me. About your mother. About what I said in the library. I was drunk and angry, but there's something you need to know." Cersei steps closer, her green eyes sharp with interest. "Your grace should rest. Perhaps such conversations can wait until you've recovered." But Robert ignores her, his gaze fixed on Jon's face. "The night you were brought to me, Ned was covered in blood. Not his own blood. He'd been fighting, but not against enemies. Something had happened at that tower, something he never talks about." "Robert," Ned's voice carries a warning as he enters the chamber. "You need rest, not conversation." "I need truth," Robert gasps. 14 years I've wondered why Ned looked so broken when he brought you to me, why he flinched every time I called you my son, why he watches you with such guilt in his eyes." Jon feels the world tilting around him as pieces of the puzzle slide into place with terrifying clarity. Uncle Ned's guilt, his evasions, the way he sometimes looks at Jon as if seeing a ghost. It all makes sense if Jon is not Robert's son at all, but someone else's. Someone whose very existence might be a threat to everything. Later that night, after the maesters have declared Robert stable but weak, Jon finds himself walking the battlements of the Red Keep with Ned beside him. The city spreads out below them, its lights twinkling like fallen stars, but neither man pays attention to the view. "Uncle," Jon says quietly, "I know you're keeping something from me, something about who I really am." Ned stops walking, his hands gripping the stone parapet until his knuckles show white. "Jon, there are some secrets that are kept not out of shame, but out of love. Not to hurt someone, but to protect them." "Protect me from what? The truth?" Before Ned can answer, they hear voices drifting up from the garden below. Curious, they peer over the battlement and see two figures in a secluded alcove, Queen Cersei and Sir Jaime Lannister, locked in an embrace that no brother and sister should share. Jon and Ned watch in horrified fascination as the twins kiss with passionate intensity, their hands roaming over each other's bodies with obvious desire. When they break apart, their whispered words carry clearly in the still night air. "How much longer must we pretend?" Cersei asks desperately. "Robert grows sicker each day, and when he dies, our children will be safe," Jaime replies. "Joffrey will be king, and no one will question his legitimacy. What about the bastard? Jon still stands in our way. Jon won't be a problem much longer. Father has plans, and when the time comes—" The conversation trails off as the twins move deeper into the garden. But Jon and Ned have heard enough. They stare at each other in the moonlight, both understanding the magnitude of what they've witnessed. "The royal children," Ned whispers, his voice hollow with shock. They're not Robert's children at all. They're bastards born of incest. Jon's mind races as he processes this revelation alongside his growing suspicions about his own parentage. If Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen are not Robert's true children, then his position as heir is secure, unless his own legitimacy is called into question. "Uncle," he says urgently, "if they're not Robert's children, and if I'm not, if there's doubt about my parentage too." Ned closes his eyes in anguish. The web of lies and secrets has become so complex that truth and falsehood are almost impossible to separate. But one thing is certain. The realm stands on the edge of chaos, and the boy beside him, regardless of whose blood flows in his veins, may be the only thing standing between the Seven Kingdoms and civil war. "We need to be very careful, Jon," Ned says finally. "Very careful indeed. Because if what we just witnessed becomes known, and if questions about your birth gain currency at the same time—" He doesn't need to finish the sentence. Jon understands the implications perfectly. The Game of Thrones has become more deadly than ever, and he stands at its very center, carrying secrets that could either save the realm or destroy it entirely. In the distance, a bell tolls midnight, marking the end of another day in a kingdom built on lies. The royal hunting lodge sits like a jewel in the Kingswood, its ancient stones warmed by the afternoon sun, as lords and ladies gather for what was meant to be a celebration of the hunt. Instead, the air thrums with tension and whispered prayers as maesters rush between chambers with bandages and potions, their faces grave with the knowledge that the King of the Seven Kingdoms lies dying within. Jon Baratheon, now 15 years old and bearing himself with the presence of a man, stands outside his father's chamber, with hands clenched into fists. His dark hair falls across grey eyes that burn with a mixture of grief and confusion. The boar that gored Robert had struck with the fury of a creature possessed, its tusks finding their mark in the king's belly, despite the presence of a dozen skilled hunters. "How bad is it?" Jon asks Grand Maester Pycelle, as the elderly man emerges from the chamber, his robe stained with blood. Pycelle's lined face carries the weight of terrible knowledge. "The wound is deep, my prince. The king has lost much blood, and there are signs of poison in the gut. I fear." He shakes his head sadly. "You should say your farewells while he still draws breath." Jon's world tilts on its axis. For all of Robert's drinking and declining health, the king had seemed indestructible, a force of nature too large and loud to be brought low by mere mortality. The thought of ruling without his father's guidance fills Jon with a terror he has never known. Inside the chamber, Robert lies propped against pillows, his massive frame looking strangely diminished beneath silk coverlets, soaked with perspiration. His breathing comes in shallow gasps, and his skin has taken on a greyish pallor that speaks of approaching death. Beside the bed, Queen Cersei maintains a vigil that might appear devoted to observers, but Jon catches the calculation in her green eyes as she watches her husband's life ebb away. "Jon." Robert's voice is barely a whisper, but his eyes focus on his son with desperate intensity. "My boy, come closer." Jon kneels beside the bed and takes his father's hand, shocked by how cold and fragile it feels. "I'm here, father. The maesters say I'm dying." Robert's laugh turns into a cough that brings blood to his lips. And for once, they're right about something. His grip tightens with surprising strength. "Listen to me, son. When I'm gone, Cersei will try to put Joffrey on the throne. You cannot let that happen." Cersei's face hardens, but she says nothing, merely moving closer as if to better hear her husband's final words. "The succession is clear," Jon replies, though his voice wavers slightly. "I am your acknowledged heir." "Yes, but they'll question your legitimacy. They always have." Robert's eyes dart towards Cersei before returning to Jon. "That's why I need you to promise me something. Find Ned Stark. Trust no one but him. He knows things that may help you claim what's yours by right." Before Jon can ask what Robert means, the king's eyes flutter closed, and his breathing becomes even more labored. Jon looks around frantically, but the chamber has emptied, save for Cersei, who watches her husband's death throes with barely concealed anticipation. "Your Grace," Jon says urgently to the Queen, "we should summon Uncle Ned and the small council. There are arrangements to be made." "Indeed there are." Cersei's voice carries a steel that Jon has never heard before. "But perhaps not the arrangements you imagine." The king's breathing stops. For a moment, the chamber falls into absolute silence. Then Cersei moves with swift purpose, pulling the coverlet over Robert's face before turning to face Jon with eyes that glitter like emeralds in torchlight. "The king is dead," she says, with calm finality. "Long live the king." "Long live King Jon," Jon replies automatically, the words feeling strange on his tongue. Cersei's smile is sharp as a blade. "Oh, my dear boy, I think you misunderstand the situation." Before Jon can respond, the chamber doors burst open, and Sir Ilyn Payne enters with a dozen gold cloaks, their hands resting on their sword hilts. Behind them comes Prince Joffrey, now 12 and tall for his age, his golden hair gleaming, and his green eyes bright with excitement. "Mother," Joffrey says with barely contained glee, "is it done? Is he finally dead?" Jon stares in shock at the boy he has treated as a younger brother, seeing something in Joffrey's expression that chills him to the bone. "What's happening here?" "What's happening," Cersei replies smoothly, "is that the rightful king is claiming his throne. Guards, arrest this bastard pretender." "I am the acknowledged heir," Jon protests, his hand moving instinctively toward his sword. "My father named me his successor." "Your father was a drunken fool," Cersei snaps, her mask of civility finally falling away. "And you are nothing but a bastard born of some tavern whore. My son is Robert's true-born heir, legitimate in the eyes of gods and men." Steel rings as Jon draws his sword, but he finds himself facing odds that even his considerable skill cannot overcome. "You're making a mistake, Cersei. The lords will never accept this usurpation. We shall see." The standoff might have ended in bloodshed, but the chamber doors open again to admit Ned Stark, his face grim with the urgency that has driven him to ride hard from King's Landing. He takes in the scene: Robert's covered corpse, Cersei's triumphant expression, Joffrey's eager anticipation, and Jon surrounded by hostile guards, and his hand moves to his sword. "What is the meaning of this?" Ned demands, his voice carrying all the authority of the hand of the king. "Lord Stark," Cersei says with mock courtesy, "how good of you to arrive in time to witness the coronation of the rightful king. Surely you don't intend to support the claim of a bastard over that of Robert's true-born son." Jon sees something flicker across Ned's face, a moment of decision that will shape the fate of kingdoms. For nearly 16 years, Ned has kept his secret, has allowed Jon to live as Robert's son, rather than reveal the truth that could destroy everything. But now, with Robert dead and civil war looming, the time for lies may finally have passed. "Joffrey has no claim to the throne," Ned says quietly, his words carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "He is not Robert's son." The chamber erupts in shocked silence. Even the guards seem taken aback by such a bold accusation. Cersei's face goes white with fury. "How dare you suggest such a thing?" "Because it's true!" Ned's voice never wavers. "Your children are bastards born of incest with your brother Jaime. I have proof of your adultery, witnesses to your crimes. Robert may have been too blind to see the truth, but I am not." Jon stares at his uncle in shock. He has suspected the truth about Joffrey's parentage since witnessing Cersei and Jaime together. But hearing it spoken aloud makes it feel suddenly, terrifyingly real. "Even if that were true," Cersei hisses, "it doesn't change the fact that your precious Jon is himself a bastard. Where are the marriage documents proving his legitimacy? Where is the noble mother who bore him? All you have are the ravings of a drunk king who couldn't remember which whore he'd bedded." Ned looks at Jon for a long moment, and in his eyes the boy sees the weight of 16 years of guilt and secrecy. When Ned speaks again, his voice is soft, but carries clearly to every corner of the chamber. Jon is not Robert's son. That much is true. Jon feels the world shatter around him. After years of growing suspicion, hearing the truth spoken aloud hits him like a physical blow. "Uncle, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that you are not a bastard, Jon. You are the true-born son of Prince Rhaegar Targaryen and my sister, Lyanna Stark. You are the rightful heir to the Iron Throne by right of blood, born in love and protected by a promise I made to your dying mother." The silence that follows is deafening. Jon stares at Ned in complete shock, his mind reeling as every certainty he has ever known crumbles to dust. Targaryen. He is a Targaryen, son of the prince who supposedly kidnapped and raped Lyanna Stark, heir to the Mad King's legacy. "That's impossible," he whispers. "Your mother was never kidnapped," Ned continues, his voice growing stronger as the truth finally pours out. "She loved Rhaegar, married him in secret. When she died giving birth to you in the Tower of Joy, she made me promise to protect you, to keep you safe from Robert's hatred of all things Targaryen. So I lied. I claimed you as Robert's bastard, rather than reveal that you carried the blood of dragons." Cersei's laughter is sharp and bitter. "How convenient. The bastard claims to be a Targaryen, an even greater threat to my son's rightful rule. Guards, kill them both." But the guards hesitate, confusion evident on their faces. The revelation has shattered their certainty about who has the right to rule, and they look between Cersei's fury and Ned's steady resolve with obvious uncertainty. Jon finds his voice at last, though it emerges as barely more than a croak. 16 years. You've lied to me for 16 years. "To protect you," Ned replies urgently. "Jon, you must understand." "Understand?" Jon's voice rises to a shout that echoes off the stone walls. "I don't understand anything. Am I Stark or Targaryen? Baratheon or bastard? Who am I supposed to be?" "You are who you choose to be," Ned says firmly. "Blood doesn't determine a man's character. His actions do. You have been raised with honor, taught to protect those who cannot protect themselves, prepared to rule with justice and compassion. That matters more than any name or bloodline." Joffrey, who has been silent through the revelations, finally speaks with a voice that carries disturbing echoes of his mother's cruelty. It doesn't matter what he chooses to call himself, Targaryen or bastard. He's still standing in my way. His child's hand moves to the sword at his side with an eagerness that chills everyone present. The moment stretches taut as a bowstring until it's broken by the sound of approaching horses. Through the windows, Jon can see banners approaching the lodge. The golden rose of House Tyrell, the red apple of House Fossaway, the purple unicorn of House Brax. Lords arriving for what they believe will be a continuation of the hunt, unaware that they're walking into the opening act of a civil war. "Choose quickly, Jon," Ned says urgently. "Cersei will not let you leave this room alive if she can help it. But if you claim your birthright, if you stand as Aegon Targaryen, 6th of his name, you might survive long enough to press your claim." Jon looks around the chamber, at Cersei's murderous fury, at Joffrey's eager cruelty, at the confused guards who don't know whom to obey. Then he looks at his father's covered corpse, the man who raised him with love despite believing him a bastard born of a moment's weakness. "I don't want the Targaryen name," he says finally, his voice steady despite the chaos in his heart. "But I won't let the realm fall to murderers and kinslayers either." He straightens to his full height, every inch the prince he was raised to be. "I am Jon Baratheon, acknowledged son of Robert Baratheon, first of his name. And by his will and testament, I am king of the 7 kingdoms. The die is cast. The war for the Iron Throne has begun, and the boy who thought he knew who he was must learn to rule a kingdom while carrying the weight of secrets that could either save the realm or tear it apart. Outside, the approaching lords have no idea they're about to choose sides in a conflict that will define the future of Westeros for generations to come. The great hall of Storm's End thunders with the sound of mailed fists striking oak tables as lords of the Stormlands debate the succession in voices that carry the rumble of approaching war. Jon Baratheon, barely 15, but already bearing the weight of kingship on his shoulders, stands before the assembled bannermen, while ravens bearing competing claims flutter through castle windows like harbingers of chaos. 3 days have passed since Robert's death at the hunting lodge, and the Seven Kingdoms have already begun to fracture along lines of loyalty, ambition, and blood. Lord Donal Swann unfurls a scroll bearing the golden lion seal of House Lannister, his weathered face grim as he reads aloud the proclamation that has set the realm ablaze. Queen Cersei, regent for his grace, King Joffrey, first of his name, calls upon all loyal subjects to reject the pretender, Jon Snow, bastard born of tavern filth and raised above his station through the weakness of the late king. Swann's voice carries disgust for the words he speaks. She declares that any who support the bastard's claim commit treason against the rightful king. Lord Caron spits on the floor with contempt. Joffrey Baratheon has never set foot in the Stormlands, never bled for our people or shared our burdens. What claim has he to our loyalty? The claim of legitimacy, replies Lord Errol cautiously. Whatever else we might say about Queen Cersei, Joffrey was born in wedlock to Robert's queen. Can we say the same of Jon? The question hangs in the air like a blade. Jon feels the eyes of every lord in the hall upon him, measuring, judging, weighing his worth against bloodlines and birthrights that matter more than character in the cruel arithmetic of power. My lords, Jon says, his voice carrying across the hall with surprising authority for one so young. I was acknowledged by King Robert as his son and heir. I have been raised to serve the realm, trained in the arts of war and governance, prepared for the throne I now claim by right. Judge me by my deeds, not by whispers about my birth. Lord Selmy, brother to Sir Barristan, nods approvingly. The boy speaks truth. I've seen him fight, seen how he treats small folk and great lords alike with respect. That matters more than whether his mother wore a crown or served wine. But before the debate can continue, another raven arrives bearing the 3-headed dragon of House Targaryen worked in gold. The maester who reads it turns pale as the words sink in, and Jon feels his stomach drop as he realizes what this must mean. Prince Stannis Baratheon, Lord of Dragonstone, rightful heir to his brother King Robert, declares, the maester's voice falters, declares his support for the claim of Jon Baratheon, acknowledging him as Robert's true son and rightful king. Shocked silence grips the hall. Of all the outcomes Jon had feared or hoped for, Stannis' support had seemed impossible. The man was rigid in matters of law and legitimacy, unlikely to back what many considered a bastard's claim to the throne. Lord Caron recovers first. If Lord Stannis supports Jon's claim, that changes everything. Stannis may be hard as iron, but no man questions his honor or his judgment. Stannis has ships, adds Lord Swann pragmatically, and Dragonstone controls the approach to King's Landing. With his support, we might actually have a chance against the Lannisters. Jon's relief is short-lived, however, as yet another raven arrives, this one bearing the golden-crowned stag of House Baratheon. The news it brings shatters any hope of a united front against Cersei's usurpation. Lord Renly Baratheon has declared himself rightful king of the 7 kingdoms, the maester reads, his voice growing steadier as he continues. He claims that the succession passed to him as Robert's surviving true-born brother, rejecting both the bastard Jon's claim and Prince Joffrey's legitimacy. He calls upon all lords to support his reign, backed by the might of the Reach and the gold of Highgarden. The hall erupts in chaos. Some lords curse Renly's ambition, Others debate the legal precedents, and a few quietly calculate which side offers the best chance of survival and profit. Jon closes his eyes briefly, understanding that what began as a contest between himself and Joffrey has become something far more complex and deadly. 4 kings, Lord Caron mutters. Jon, Joffrey, Stannis and Renly. The realm will bleed until only one remains. 3 kings, Jon corrects quietly. Stannis supports my claim. He and I stand together against the usurpers. Lord Donal Swann steps forward, his grizzled face serious as he meets Jon's gaze. Then you have Storm's End, my king. House Swann has served the Baratheons for 300 years, and we will not stop now. He draws his sword and kneels, the steel ringing against stone. I pledge my swords to Jon of House Baratheon, first of his name, rightful king of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men. One by one, other lords follow suit until nearly the entire hall kneels before their young king. Only Lord Errol remains standing, his face torn between duty and doubt. My king, Errol says carefully, I will not raise arms against you, but neither can I commit my house to a war whose outcome remains so uncertain. I beg your leave to withdraw to my lands and remain neutral until the gods decide the victor. Jon nods gravely. You may go in peace, Lord Errol. I pray that when this is over, we may still call ourselves friends. As the lords disperse to marshal their forces, Jon finds himself alone with Sir Davos Seaworth, the Onion Knight who has arrived from Dragonstone bearing Stannis' pledge of support. The former smuggler's honest face shows the worry that his words carefully conceal. Your Grace, Davos says quietly, Prince Stannis bids me tell you that he accepts your claim because he believes Robert acknowledged you in good faith. But he also warns that others may question the wisdom of a war fought to place a 15-year-old boy on the throne. And what do you think, Sir Davos? Am I too young to rule? Davos considers the question with the careful thought that has made him Stannis' most trusted advisor. Age is just a number, Your Grace. I've known men of 50 who had the wisdom of children, and boys who understood justice better than their grandfathers. The question isn't whether you're old enough, it's whether you're ready to make the hard choices that kings must make. Before Jon can respond, urgent shouts from the castle yard draw their attention to the windows. Below, a column of riders approaches under the grey direwolf banner of House Stark. At their head rides Robb Stark, now 14 and already showing the bearing of a war leader, with young Greywind loping alongside his horse. Jon's heart lifts at the sight of his cousin, but his hope dims when he sees the careful neutrality in Robb's expression as they meet in the great hall. Between them stands the weight of competing loyalties, blood ties against political necessity. Cousin, Robb says formally, offering a bow that acknowledges Jon's claimed kingship while maintaining careful distance. I've come to speak for the North. Then speak freely, Robb. We're family. Robb's jaw tightens slightly. That's precisely the problem. The North has called its banners to defend against southern ambitions. But we cannot choose sides in this war between Baratheon brothers. You may be my cousin, but so is Joffrey through his mother. The North will remain neutral until the victor emerges. The words hit Jon like a physical blow. He had counted on Stark support, on the bonds of family and shared upbringing to secure the largest kingdom in Westeros for his cause. Instead, he faces the cold calculation of politics that values neutrality over kinship. The North could end this war quickly, Jon says quietly. With Stark and Baratheon united, we could crush the Lannisters and restore peace to the realm. Peace? Robb's voice carries an edge that speaks of wisdom beyond his years. Jon, there are 4 claimants to the throne. Even if we defeat Cersei and Joffrey, we'd still face Renly's host from the Reach and the inevitable resentment of the lords who backed the losing side. This war will not end with a single victory. Their conversation is interrupted by the arrival of another messenger, this one bearing grim news that changes everything. Tywin Lannister has moved from Casterly Rock with 40,000 men, while Jaime Lannister marches from King's Landing with the royal army. The Lannisters are moving to crush Jon's rebellion before it can gain momentum. "How many men can you muster?" Robb asks pragmatically. 20,000 from the Stormlands, perhaps 5,000 more from lords who served my father loyally. Stannis brings another 15,000 from Dragonstone and the Narrow Sea. Jon's voice carries the weight of command despite his youth. Against the Lannisters, 60,000, plus whatever support Renly brings from the Reach. "Then you need allies," Robb says bluntly, "and you need them soon, or this war will be over before winter comes." The next morning brings the first real test of Jon's military leadership, as scouts report a Lannister force approaching under Sir Kevan Lannister's command. 10,000 men march under the Golden Lion banners, clearly intending to take Storm's End before Jon can consolidate his power. Jon stands on the battlements, wearing his father's crown for the first time, the gold and iron heavy on his brow as he watches the enemy army deploy across the fields below. Beside him, Sir Davos offers counsel, born of hard experience. "They want a quick victory to discourage your other supporters," Davos observes. "Show weakness now, and lords throughout the realm will abandon your cause. Then we give them a fight they won't forget." The battle begins at dawn with the thunder of war horns echoing across the countryside. Jon leads the sortie himself, his sword cutting through Lannister ranks as Storm's End's garrison pours out to meet the attack. For a boy who has known only practice yards and tournaments, the reality of war proves both terrifying and exhilarating. Steel rings against steel as Jon finds himself facing a Lannister knight whose skill far exceeds anything he faced in the training yard. Only quick reflexes and the countless hours spent with Ser Barristan save his life as the knight's blade whistles past his head. "You fight well for a bastard whelp," the knight snarls as they circle each other. "Well enough," Jon replies, and proves it by driving his point through the man's throat. Around him, the battle rages with the fury of men fighting for their lives and their beliefs. Jon sees his bannermen fall beside him, good men dying in his name, and feels the weight of kingship in a way that no crown or ceremony could convey. But when the sun reaches its zenith, it's the Lannister banners that retreat across blood-soaked fields, leaving behind nearly 3,000 dead. Jon's first victory as king comes at a price that will haunt his dreams for years to come. But it also sends a message throughout the Seven Kingdoms. The boy king can fight. That evening, as ravens carry news of the battle to every corner of Westeros, Jon sits in his father's chair and contemplates the letters that will shape the realm's future. Messages to potential allies, negotiations with neutral houses, promises and threats that will determine whether his crown becomes reality or mere aspiration. "The Game of Thrones has no winners," Sir Davos observes, as he helps Jon draft correspondence to lords throughout the realm. "Only survivors." Jon looks out at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky, each one representing a choice that could save or damn the Seven Kingdoms. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new enemies, new tests of a boy who must become a king or die trying. The war has begun in earnest, and Jon Baratheon stands at its center, wielding a crown won through blood and destined to be kept the same way. The great hall of Harrenhal fills with the whispered prayers of desperate men, as news spreads like wildfire through the assembled lords. Jon Baratheon stands before a map table, covered with wooden figurines representing the armies that tear the Seven Kingdoms apart. but his attention is fixed on the parchment that threatens to destroy everything he has fought to build. Lord Rosebolton's pale eyes glitter with malicious satisfaction as he reads aloud the proclamation that arrived with the morning ravens. Let it be known throughout the 7 kingdoms that the pretender calling himself Jon Baratheon is in truth Jon Targaryen, bastard son of the mad Prince Rhaegar, born of the rape of Lyanna Stark, and hidden by traitors seeking to place dragon spawn upon the Iron Throne. The silence that follows could cut steel. Jon feels the eyes of every lord in the hall weighing him, measuring him, searching his face for signs of the madness that destroyed his grandfather and brought down a dynasty. At 15, he has learned to mask his emotions behind a king's composure. But the revelation of his true parentage threatens to shatter that carefully constructed facade. "Lies," declares Lord Karstark, though his voice lacks conviction. Cersei Lannister grows desperate and spreads false rumors to weaken our cause. Are they false? Lord Glover's question hangs in the air like a drawn sword. His weathered face shows the confusion of a man whose world has suddenly shifted beneath his feet. My lord, the resemblance to the Starks has always been noted. And if the boy truly carries Targaryen blood, then he carries the blood of kings and conquerors, Jon says firmly, his voice carrying across the hall with surprising authority. The same blood that united the 7 kingdoms under one crown, that built the Iron Throne itself. Lord Umber laughs harshly. The same blood that burned lords alive for sport and heard voices in the flames. The same blood that cost the realm thousands of lives when madness took the throne. Jon steps forward, his grey eyes burning with controlled fury. Judge me by my actions, not by the sins of dead men. Have I shown madness in my rule? Have I burned castles or tortured prisoners? Or have I sought justice and mercy in equal measure? The lords exchange uncertain glances. Jon's conduct throughout the war has been exemplary, showing mercy to defeated enemies, protecting small folk from the worst ravages of battle, maintaining the discipline of his forces even in victory. Yet the fear of Targaryen madness runs deep in the collective memory of Westeros. Lord Manderley clears his throat nervously. Your Grace, we do not question your character, but the revelation of your true parentage changes everything. The lords who followed you as Robert's son may not be so eager to crown a Targaryen. As if summoned by his words, more ravens arrive, bearing news that confirms Jon's worst fears. Houses Dondarrion and Carron have declared for Renly Baratheon, claiming they cannot support a pretender with dragon blood. Lord Connington has withdrawn his forces to Griffin's Roost, while House Catherine sends word that they must consider the good of the realm above personal loyalty. How many have we lost? Jon asks quietly. Sir Davos, now serving as Jon's unofficial advisor, consults a ledger with grim efficiency. Perhaps 8,000 men in the last 3 days, Your Grace. Word is spreading faster than we can control it. Jon closes his eyes briefly, feeling the weight of kingship pressing down upon him like a physical force. In the space of a single revelation, his army has been cut nearly in half, and more defections seem inevitable as fear of Targaryen rule spreads throughout the realm. There may be a way forward, says a voice from the shadows near the hall's great fireplace. Tyrion Lannister emerges into the light, his mismatched eyes bright with intelligence and something that might be sympathy. The dwarf's presence in Jon's camp has raised eyebrows since his arrival 2 days ago, claiming to seek audience with the true king. Speak freely, Lord Tyrion, Jon says, grateful for any counsel in these dark hours. Tyrion climbs onto a chair to better address the assembled lords, his voice carrying clearly despite his small stature. The realm fears Targaryen madness, yes, but it also remembers Targaryen greatness. Aegon the Conqueror, Jaehaerys the Wise, Daeron the Good. Not all dragons were mad. Some brought peace and prosperity to the Seven Kingdoms. Pretty words, Lord Umber growls, but words won't win battles or restore confidence. No, Tyrion agrees, but actions will. Your Grace, you have something no Targaryen king has possessed in 3 centuries, the love of the people. You've been raised among them, fought beside them, bled for them. Use that. Embrace your heritage, but make it clear that you rule not as a dragon, but as a king who serves his subjects. Before Jon can respond, horns sound from the castle's towers announcing new arrivals. Through the tall windows, the assembled lords can see banners approaching across the field. The white sunburst of House Karstark, the silver trout of House Tully, and most surprising of all, the grey direwolf of House Stark. Robb Stark enters the hall with a dozen northern lords at his back, his young face set with determination that makes him seem older than his 14 years. Behind him come Lords Karstark, Umber, and Mormont, men whose loyalty to the Starks runs deeper than fear of ancient curses. "Cousin," Robb says formally, but his voice carries warmth that wasn't there at their last meeting. "I've come to pledge the North to your cause." The hall erupts in startled murmurs. Jon stares at his cousin in amazement, hardly daring to believe what he's hearing. "Robb, you said the North would remain neutral. That was before we learned the truth of your parentage." Robb's voice rings with conviction. "You are not just a Targaryen bastard, cousin. You are Lyanna Stark's son, my aunt's blood, a child of the North as much as any dragon. The North remembers, and we remember that Lyanna died to protect you." Lord Karstark steps forward, his gruff voice carrying absolute certainty. "The Starks have never knelt to southern kings by choice, but will kneel to one of our own. Stark blood trumps dragon blood in the North." "More than that," adds Lord Mormont, the grizzled warrior's face stern but approving. "This boy has been raised with honor, taught northern values, prepared to rule with justice rather than fire. If there's Targaryen in him, it's tempered by Stark steel and Baratheon strength." Jon feels tears threatening to spill as the northern lords kneel before him, one by one. In the darkest hour of his reign, when southern lords flee in terror of his heritage, the North stands firm in support of their blood. "Rise, my lords," Jon says, his voice thick with emotion. "Rise, and know that the North will never have a more faithful king." Sir Davos approaches with another scroll, this one bearing the 3-headed dragon seal of Dragonstone. "Word from Prince Stannis, your Grace. He reaffirms his support, despite the revelations about your parentage." Jon breaks the seal and reads Stannis's characteristic blunt message aloud. "Blood is blood, but character is what matters in a king. I supported you as Robert's son, because you showed promise. I support you still, because you've proven that promise true. The realm needs a just ruler, not a pure bloodline." The endorsement from the famously rigid Stannis carries weight with many of the wavering lords. If a man who burns people for minor infractions can overlook Jon's Targaryen blood, perhaps the heritage is not the curse many believe it to be. "Your Grace," Lord Manderley ventures, "if I may ask, how do you see yourself? Stark or Targaryen? Baratheon or bastard?" Jon looks around the hall at the faces watching him. Some fearful, some hopeful, all waiting for an answer that will shape the future of the Seven Kingdoms. When he speaks, his voice carries a certainty that has been building throughout the conversation. "I am Jon of House Stark, son of Lyanna and heir to Winterfell's honor. I am Jon of House Targaryen, son of Rhaegar, and heir to the dragon's strength. I am Jon of House Baratheon, acknowledged son of Robert, and heir to the Iron Throne by right of love, if not blood. He straightens to his full height, every inch a king. I am all of these things, and I will not apologize for any of them. The realm will have a king who understands honor from the north, strength from the dragons, and justice from the man who raised him. The speech rings through the hall like steel on steel, and Jon sees something shift in the faces watching him. Fear begins to give way to something like hope, as lords realize they may be witnessing the birth of a new kind of king, one who draws strength from all his heritage rather than being cursed by any part of it. The moment is interrupted by the arrival of another raven, this one bearing news that changes the very nature of the conflict consuming Westeros. The maester who reads it turns pale as parchment before speaking. Your Grace, there are reports from across the narrow sea. Daenerys Targaryen, last daughter of the Mad King, has hatched 3 dragon eggs. She commands beasts of fire and blood, and word is that she gathers an army to reclaim her father's throne. Silence grips the hall as the implications sink in. Jon is no longer the only Targaryen with a claim to the Iron Throne. Somewhere across the narrow sea, his aunt commands actual dragons, creatures of legend made flesh, and will undoubtedly seek to press her own claim to the crown. Dragons, Lord Umber whispers, and in that single word lies all the terror that fire-made flesh inspires in mortal men. Jon feels the weight of destiny settling upon his shoulders like a mantle of ice and fire. The war for the Iron Throne has grown beyond anything he could have imagined. No longer just a contest between ambitious nobles, it has become a struggle for the very soul of Westeros, between the old ways and the new, between the memory of dragon rule and the hope of something better. Let her come, Jon says quietly, but his words carry to every corner of the hall. I will not be driven from my birthright by fear of fire. The Iron Throne belongs to the king who can best serve the realm, not to whoever commands the largest dragons. As night falls over Harrenhal, Jon stands alone on the battlements, looking east toward the narrow sea where his aunt gathers her strength. 3 heritages war within him: the honor of the Starks, the fire of the Targaryens, the strength of the Baratheons, but he will forge them into something new, something worthy of the crown he seeks to claim. The Game of Thrones grows ever more complex, and Jon stands at its center, no longer the bastard prince, but the dragon wolf, heir to 3 houses, and servant to one realm that desperately needs a king who can unite rather than divide. The dawn breaks blood-red over King's Landing as 3 armies converge on the ancient seat of kings. From the north, Jon Baratheon leads 25,000 men under the banners of wolf and stag, their steel glinting like stars in the morning light. From Dragonstone across Blackwater Bay, Stannis commands the royal fleet and 15,000 soldiers whose loyalty to duty burns as bright as their torches. Within the city walls, Tywin Lannister has gathered 40,000 defenders beneath the Golden Lion, while wildfire burns green in hidden caches beneath the Septon streets. Jon sits his destrier at the head of his host, his dark hair streaming beneath a crown of iron and gold, his grey eyes fixed on the Red Keep, where his childhood ended and his kingship must begin. At 15, he bears himself with the presence of a man tested by war and shaped by the weight of 3 bloodlines that flow through his veins like fire and ice and iron. The city has never fallen to assault, Sir Davos observes, studying the massive walls that have protected King's Landing for 3 centuries. Aegon took it with dragons, Robert with treachery from within. Those gates have turned back every honest attack. "Then we'll have to be dishonest," Jon replies, his voice carrying the grim humor that has sustained him through months of brutal warfare. "Signal Lord Stannis. When his ships engage the harbor defenses, we attack the Gate of the Gods." Horns echo across the field as 25,000 men begin their advance. Jon rides at their head, his sword bare in his hand, while the banners of a dozen great houses snap in the wind above him. House Stark's direwolf runs beside Baratheon's crowned stag, northern loyalty wedded to royal authority, in a union that has confounded enemies and allies alike. The defenders atop the walls loose their first volley of arrows, a black cloud that darkens the sky before falling like deadly rain among the advancing ranks. Men scream and fall, but the host presses forward with the inexorable tide of those who fight not for gold or glory, but for the belief that their cause is just. "Gates heavily defended," shouts Lord Karstark, his gruff voice barely audible above the thunder of charging horses. "They've got scorpions on the towers, oil ready to pour. This won't be easy." "Nothing worthwhile ever is," Jon calls back, spurring his horse toward the melee, already forming around the massive iron portcullis. Steel rings against steel as his vanguard crashes into the Lannister spears like a breaking wave, and Jon finds himself in the heart of battle for the first time since Storm's End. A Lannister knight in gilded armor swings a morning star at Jon's head, the spiked ball whistling through the air with deadly intent. Jon ducks beneath the blow and drives his sword up through the man's visor, feeling the blade pierce flesh and bone with sickening ease. Blood spatters his face as he wrenches the weapon free, but there's no time for revulsion as another enemy appears on his left. Around him, the battle rages with the fury of men fighting for their lives and their beliefs. Jon sees his bannermen fall beside him, good men whose names he knows, whose families will mourn them. But he also sees the Golden Lion banners being driven back, step by bloody step. From the harbor comes the sound of Stannis' attack, the crash of burning ships and the screams of drowning men mixing with the roar of wildfire as Cersei's hidden caches ignite. Green flames leap skyward like the breath of dragons, turning the Blackwater into a cauldron of liquid fire that consumes friend and foe alike. "The king!" The cry goes up from the defenders on the walls as they recognize Jon's crowned figure in the melee below. "Kill the pretender, 1,000 dragons for his head." The bounty draws every sellsword and ambitious knight within reach, and Jon finds himself surrounded by enemies who see him not as a king but as a path to wealth and royal favor. His sword work becomes a deadly dance as he cuts his way through them, each strike driven by years of training under Ser Barristan's watchful eye and honed by months of real warfare. But it's not enough. The Gate of the Gods holds firm despite the slaughter around it, and Jon can see his assault beginning to falter as defenders pour boiling oil from the murder holes above. Men scream as the scalding liquid strips flesh from bone, while arrows and crossbow bolts take a terrible toll among his ranks. "We need to fall back and regroup," Sir Davos calls out, his practical experience reading the flow of battle like a book. "The gates are too well defended. We're losing too many men." Jon shakes his head grimly, blood running down his face from a shallow cut above his eye. "If we retreat now, the defenders will sally out and slaughter us in the open field. We press forward, or we die here." The moment his words leave his lips, the Gate of the Gods shudders and begins to swing open with a groan of ancient hinges. For a heartbeat, Jon thinks it might be some trap, but then he sees the reason. Stannis' men have taken the harbor and fought their way through the lower city, attacking the gate mechanism from within. "Forward!" Jon roars, his voice carrying across the battlefield like a war horn. "For the realm!" The charge that follows becomes legend in the songs that will be sung for generations. Jon leads his men through the breach like a spear point of steel and fury, his crown glinting in the smoky air as he cuts down defender after defender. Behind him, comes the tide of northern steel and Stormlander iron, justice and vengeance wearing the same face as they pour into the city streets. The fighting becomes brutal house-to-house warfare as Lannister forces retreat toward the Red Keep, through streets slick with blood and lit by the green glow of wildfire. Jon finds himself separated from his main force, leading a small company of his best knights through the twisting alleys of King's Landing in pursuit of enemies who know every hidden passage and secret door. It's in the shadow of the great sept of Baelor that he encounters Sir Jaime Lannister. The Kingslayer stands alone in the plaza before the sept, his golden armor blackened with soot and his famous beauty marred by cuts and bruises. In his hands, he holds the sword that has ended kings and shaped kingdoms, and his green eyes burn with the desperate fury of a man with nothing left to lose. "So," Jaime says with the sardonic smile that has charmed ladies and terrified enemies for 20 years, "the dragon whelp comes to claim his throne. Tell me, Your Grace, do you mean to burn the city as your grandfather would have?" Jon dismounts and draws his sword, recognizing that this fight cannot be avoided or delegated. Around them, the battle rages through the city. But here, in this moment, it comes down to two men with steel in their hands and crowns hanging in the balance. "I mean to save it," Jon replies quietly, "even from those who would destroy it rather than lose it." Jaime's laugh is bitter as winter wind. "Save it? Boy, you have no idea what your precious throne costs. I've killed a king to save this city once before. I'll kill another if I must." The fight begins without ceremony or ritual, just two warriors testing each other with quick, probing strikes. Jaime is everything the songs claim. Fast as a snake, strong as a bull, with 20 years of experience behind every movement. But Jon has youth on his side, and something more, the desperate certainty of a man fighting not for glory, but for the only future he believes possible. Steel rings against steel in a deadly symphony as they circle each other in the shadow of the sept. Jaime's blade darts toward Jon's throat, only to be turned aside by a desperate parry that sends sparks flying. Jon ripostes with a cut at Jaime's knee, but the Kingslayer leaps back with cat-like grace. "You fight well for a bastard," Jaime gasps between exchanges, his breathing already labored despite his skill. "Well enough," Jon replies, and proves it by landing a cut across Jaime's sword arm that opens the muscle to the bone. The wound slows Jaime just enough for Jon to press his advantage. A series of quick strikes drives the Kingslayer back toward the sept steps, and when Jaime stumbles slightly on the uneven stone, Jon's pommel strike catches him across the temple with stunning force. Jaime falls to one knee, his sword clattering across the plaza stones. Jon's blade finds his throat, and for a moment, the fate of the Lannister dynasty rests on the edge of Valyrian steel. "Do it," Jaime whispers, his green eyes meeting Jon's grey ones without flinching. "Make yourself a Kingslayer in truth. Add my death to all the others this war has cost." Jon looks down at the man who has been both knight and monster, whose sins include kingslaying and incest, but whose courage in this moment cannot be denied. The easy choice would be to drive his blade home and eliminate a dangerous enemy. The right choice. "I am not my grandfather," Jon says quietly, lowering his sword. "And you are not your father. Yield, Ser Jaime, and I will show you the mercy Robert never knew how to give." Before Jaime can respond, a new horror erupts from the direction of the Red Keep. Green flames begin to spread through the lower city as more wildfire caches detonate, turning entire streets into rivers of fire that consume everything in their path. The plan is clear. If Cersei cannot keep the throne, she will destroy the city rather than let it fall to her enemies. "She's going to burn it all," Jaime whispers in horror, staggering to his feet. Just as Aerys wanted to do, History repeats itself in fire and blood. Jon looks toward the Red Keep, where green flames dance like demons against the sky. Somewhere in that ancient fortress, the woman who has been his enemy since childhood sits on a throne of lies, her finger poised above the trigger that will turn King's Landing into a funeral pyre for 1,000,000 souls. "Not if I can help it," Jon says grimly, turning toward the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Sir Davos appears with a company of Jon's guards, their faces grim with the news they bear. "Your Grace, we've taken the Iron Gate and the Dragon Gate. Lord Stannis—" He pauses, his voice heavy with grief. "Lord Stannis fell taking the harbour defences. A crossbow bolt to the chest. He lived long enough to see the royal fleet burn, then he was gone." The news hits Jon like a physical blow. Stannis, who had supported his claim when others wavered, who had stood by principle even when it cost him everything, dead in the service of a cause that was never truly his own. Another debt of honour that Jon will carry for the rest of his life. "And Lord Tywin?" Jon asks, though he dreads the answer. "Captured trying to escape through the Dragon Gate. He's being held under guard, awaiting your judgment." Jon nods grimly, understanding that the hardest choices of kingship still lie ahead. But first, the city must be saved from the green flames that even now spread through the lower districts like a plague of fire. "Signal all commanders," he orders, his voice carrying the authority of a king forged in the crucible of war. "Every available man is to fight the fires, not the enemy. Save the city first. We can sort out the politics later, but only if there's something left to rule." As his men rush to carry out his orders, Jon looks back at the Red Keep, where smoke and green flame paint the sky in shades of hell. Soon, very soon, he will sit upon the Iron Throne that has been the dream and nightmare of his entire life. But first, he must prove himself worthy of it by saving the very city that some would let burn, rather than lose. The great sept of Baelor stands restored to its ancient glory as the bells of King's Landing ring out across the 7 kingdoms, their bronze voices proclaiming the dawn of a new age. Within the hallowed walls where kings have knelt for 3 centuries, Jon Baratheon prepares to claim the crown that has cost so much blood to win. Sunlight streams through stained glass windows, painting rainbow patterns across marble floors still scarred by wildfire and war. At 15, Jon stands tall and straight before the altar, his dark hair catching the light like polished steel. The simple crown of iron and gold rests upon a cushion of cloth of gold, waiting to transform a boy who has known only war into a king who must learn to build peace. Behind him, the greatest lords of Westeros kneel in acknowledgement of his victory, their banners a tapestry of sworn swords and hard-won loyalty. High Septon Bath, recently appointed to replace the High Sparrow who died in the fires, raises his voice to address the assembled congregation. "We gather this day to crown a king forged in the crucible of war, tempered by the wisdom of 3 bloodlines, and proven worthy through deed rather than birth alone." Jon steps forward, his grey eyes reflecting the gravity of the moment. When he speaks, his voice carries across the vast chamber with authority earned through months of battle and years of preparation. "Lords and ladies of the 7 kingdoms, I stand before you not as a conqueror, but as a servant. Not as a man who claims divine right, but as one who has earned your trust through shared sacrifice." He pauses, letting his words settle before continuing. "Many of you know the truth of my parentage by now. I am Jon, son of Lyanna Stark and Rhaegar Targaryen, raised by Robert Baratheon as his own. I carry the blood of wolves and dragons and stags, but I choose to rule with the honor of the North, the strength of the dragon, and the justice that Robert taught me." Murmurs ripple through the congregation, but they are sounds of acceptance rather than opposition. The war has proven Jon's character, beyond any doubt, and those who survived its crucible understand that legitimacy comes from the edge of a sword as much as from ancient bloodlines. Ned Stark steps forward, bearing the crown that will transform Jon from claimant to king. His weathered face shows the relief of a man whose 16-year burden is finally lifted, whose promise to a dying sister has been fulfilled in ways he never could have imagined. Jon of House Stark, House Targaryen, and House Baratheon. Ned intones with formal gravity. Do you solemnly swear to govern the people of the Seven Kingdoms according to their respective laws and customs? Do you promise to cause law and justice in mercy to be executed in all your judgments? I solemnly promise so to do, Jon replies, his voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. Then by the grace of the Seven and the will of the realm, I crown you, Jon, first of his name, King of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms, and Protector of the realm. The crown settles upon Jon's head with surprising weight, but he bears it without flinching. Around him, the great lords and ladies rise to their feet with a sound like thunder, their voices joining in a chant that echoes through the sept and beyond. Long live the king! Long live King Jon! The coronation feast in the Red Keep's great hall surpasses anything seen since the days of Aerys the Mad King. Lords who spent months trying to kill each other now sit at the same tables, united by Jon's victory and his promise of justice tempered with mercy. The boy king sits at the high table, wearing his crown like he was born to it, dispensing royal justice with wisdom that belies his years. Lord Tywin Lannister stands in chains before the Iron Throne, his proud bearing intact despite his defeat and capture. Around the hall, his former enemies watch to see what manner of king Jon will prove himself to be, one who rules through fear like his Targaryen ancestors, or one who builds through mercy like the best of the Starks. Lord Tywin, Jon says, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber, you have been found guilty of treason against the crown, of conspiring to place a bastard born of incest upon the Iron Throne, and of ordering the deaths of loyal subjects who supported my rightful claim. Tywin's pale green eyes meet Jon's grey ones without flinching. I served what I believed to be the rightful king, Your Grace. History will judge whether I was right or wrong. History will judge us both, Jon replies. But I am charged with dispensing justice in the present. He pauses, weighing his words carefully. The penalty for treason is death. However, I am mindful that you served the realm faithfully for many years before this war began, and that mercy is often a king's greatest strength. The hall holds its breath, waiting to see which path the young king will choose. Therefore I sentence you to take the black and serve the remainder of your days upon the wall, where your considerable skills can protect the realm against threats more dire than any royal ambition. The sentence draws gasps from the assembled lords. Many had expected execution, others exile, but none had anticipated sending the great Tywin Lannister to serve among thieves and murderers at the edge of the world. Tywin's expression remains impassive, but Jon catches a flicker of something that might be respect in those calculating eyes. The Night's Watch, Your Grace. A curious fate for one who has spent his life in pursuit of legacy and dynasty. Perhaps that's exactly what the Watch needs, Jon replies. A man who understands the true cost of power and the responsibility that comes with it. Next comes Queen Cersei, no longer the golden beauty who once commanded the respect and fear of the Seven Kingdoms. Defeat has aged her beyond her 33 years, but her green eyes still burn with unquenched fire as she faces the boy who destroyed her plans for dynasty and revenge. Your Grace, she says with bitter mockery, I suppose I should thank you for allowing me to live long enough to see my family's complete destruction. Your family still lives, Lady Cersei, Jon corrects gently. Your children are under my protection, and they will be raised with the honor and education befitting their station. The sins of the mother need not define the next generation. For a moment, Cersei's mask slips, and Jon catches a glimpse of the woman beneath the ambition, a mother terrified for her children's futures. And what station would that be, Your Grace? Bastards born of incest have little place in the world you're building. They have the place I choose to give them, Jon replies firmly. Prince Joffrey will serve as my ward until he comes of age, learning what it means to be a true knight. Princess Myrcella and Prince Tommen will be raised at court, educated alongside the children of my loyal lords. They are innocent of their parents' crimes. The mercy shown to the Lannister children draws nods of approval from the assembled lords, many of whom have children of their own, and understand the fear that drives even the most ambitious mothers. As for you, Jon continues, addressing Cersei directly, you are stripped of all titles and lands, but you may choose between exile or service in a mother house. Your life is forfeit by law, but I would rather have you live to see the peace your war nearly destroyed. Cersei's laugh is sharp as broken glass. Exile or the faith? How generous of you, boy king. I choose exile, if only to spare myself the sight of watching you destroy everything my family built. With the royal justice dispensed, Jon turns his attention to the task of rebuilding the realm his war has fractured. The great lords gather around the Iron Throne as he announces his appointments to the small council, each choice carefully calculated to balance competing interests and reward loyal service. Lord Eddard Stark, Jon announces, I name you Hand of the King, as your honor and wisdom have guided me since childhood. Ned accepts the golden pin with visible reluctance, understanding better than anyone the burdens that come with serving as a king's conscience. I am honored by your trust, Your Grace, and pray I prove worthy of it. Sir Davos Seaworth, I name you Master of Ships, for your loyalty has been a beacon through the darkest storms. The former smuggler's weathered face shows emotion as he accepts the office that raises him from lowborn criminal to one of the highest positions in the realm. Other appointments follow. Lord Samwell Tarly as Master of Coin, despite his youth, his scholarly nature ideal for managing the realm's finances. Maester Aemon as Grand Maester, the ancient Targaryen's wisdom, a bridge between Jon's dragon blood and his chosen path. As the appointments conclude, a raven arrives bearing news that casts a shadow over the celebration. Maester Aemon's ancient hands tremble slightly as he reads the message from Castle Black, his voice carrying ominous weight as he shares its contents. Your Grace, Lord Commander Mormont reports strange happenings beyond the wall. Wildling refugees speak of the dead walking, of ancient enemies stirring in the haunted forest. The Night's Watch requests reinforcement and aid in investigating these unusual events. The hall falls silent as the implications sink in. Jon feels a chill that has nothing to do with the approaching winter, remembering old stories told by his scepter about the long night and the terrors that once stalked the realm before the wall was raised. It seems the realm faces threats that make our recent war seem like children's games, Jon observes quietly. We will send aid to the wall, and I will consider visiting myself once the kingdom is secure. Lord Tyrion Lannister, recently appointed as Master of Laws despite his family's fall, speaks up with characteristic wit tinged by genuine concern. Your Grace, if the dead truly walk beyond the wall, perhaps the living should focus on more immediate concerns, such as securing your dynasty through marriage. The suggestion draws chuckles from some lords and calculating looks from others. At 15, Jon is of age to marry, and his choice of queen will shape the political landscape for generations to come. Marriage negotiations will begin soon, Jon acknowledges, though his voice carries reluctance. The realm needs stability, and a royal heir would provide that. But I will not be rushed into alliance for alliance's sake alone. Several lords exchange glances, each wondering if his daughter might catch the eye of the dragon wolf who now sits the Iron Throne. Houses Tully, Arryn, and even some who opposed Jon during the war begin calculating the advantages of binding themselves to the new dynasty. As the feast continues late into the night, Jon eventually finds himself alone in the throne room, sitting upon the Iron Throne for the first time without the weight of immediate crisis pressing upon his shoulders. The ancient seat of Aegon the Conqueror feels alien beneath him, its twisted swords a reminder of the price of power and the responsibility that comes with it. Ned enters the chamber quietly, his familiar presence a comfort in the vast space that has seen so much ambition and tragedy. "Regrets, Your Grace?" Ned asks, settling into a chair below the throne. Jon considers the question seriously, his grey eyes reflecting the torchlight as he contemplates the path that led him here. About the war? About the deaths? Yes, I regret all of it. But about taking the throne? He pauses, then shakes his head. No. The realm needed someone willing to make the hard choices, to build rather than simply rule. If not me, then who? And the future? What manner of king do you mean to be? Jon's smile is tired but genuine. The kind Robert wanted to be, but never could. Just, merciful when possible, firm when necessary. A king who serves his people rather than simply commanding them. He looks toward the great windows, where the lights of King's Landing twinkle like fallen stars. The realm has bled enough. It's time to heal. Outside, the city settles into peaceful sleep for the first time in months, while ravens carry word of Jon's coronation to every corner of the Seven Kingdoms. In the far north, ancient evils stir beneath the ice. But for now, the realm has a king worthy of the crown he wears. Jon Baratheon, first of his name, sits the Iron Throne as dawn approaches, ready to face whatever challenges the future may bring with the honor of wolves, the strength of dragons, and the justice of the stag that raised him. That's our theory. Westeros is a land filled with exciting stories and possibilities, and we love exploring them. If you want to accompany us on this journey across the Seven Kingdoms and beyond, then please like, share,